Chapter 329. Dear passengers, we are here to solemnly remind you that New York's JFK Airport is about to arrive. Please put away the small table, turn on the sun visor, and straighten the back of the seat. Kafu. The flight attendant's reminder in her ear woke Ai Xiaoxi, who was not sleeping too soundly, up from her state of sleep. After looking at her position with some confusion, she couldn't help but stretch and look at her watch. It was already past 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. Of course, this was the imperial capital time. She had been on the plane for more than 10 hours. Her waist and back were really sore. This was the first time she had been on a plane for such a long time. Looking at Feng Yinshen, who was still sleeping soundly with an eye mask beside her, Ai Xiaoxi hesitated for a moment and gently pushed her. Sister Chen, get up. Maybe she heard Ai Xiaoxi's voice. Feng Yinshen's body shook first. Then she sat up straight, stretched, and then took off the eye mask. After looking around in confusion, she yawned. This plane ride is really tiring, she muttered in a low voice and pulled her head hard. Yeah. Hearing Feng Yinshen's words, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but respond. It was really too tiring. It's all your boss's fault. What kind of person is he? He said he wanted to come, but in the end, he only bought 2 economy class tickets. I don't need him to buy economy class tickets. Can't I come by myself? My waist. After stretching again, Feng Yinshen couldn't help but mutter with some annoyance. Now the plane from the imperial capital to New York was actually very cheap. A direct flight was only 2 or 3,000 yuan. Although Feng Yinshen's income was not as much as that of a celebrity, no one particularly cared about 2 or 3,000 yuan now, right? Although it was a Boeing 777, this kind of big plane, the economy cabin position was not much different from an ordinary passenger plane. It was only half lying down. Only business cabins could lie down at 160 degrees. If you want to lie down completely, you have to buy a first-class cabin. Of course, when Jiang Hai was on the plane, he bought the most high-end first-class cabin. Not only did it have a seat, but it also had a bed. Of course, the price was not ordinary. Normally, the discounted economy class tickets would cost around 2,000 to 3,000 yuan. For business class tickets, this number would have to be multiplied by 5, which would cost around 14 to 15,000 yuan. Perhaps, it would have to be increased during busy times. For the first-class cabins, the price must be multiplied by at least 10 times. 30,000 RMB was considered the lowest price. For example, Jiang Hai's car usually cost at least 50,000 RMB. 50,000 RMB was enough to buy a good car in China. Therefore, it was no wonder that Feng Yinshen's boss was stingy. Even if it was business class, the two of them would have to pay 30,000 yuan for one trip and 60,000 yuan for one trip. In addition to the money for the equipment he originally got, and the money for publicity and printing posters, it would cost at least 100,000 yuan. Anyone would feel distressed just thinking about it. After all, not everyone was as rich as Jiang Hai. Sister Chen, you are always like this after sitting for a long time. I will help you rub it when we get off the plane. Looking at Feng Yinshen's appearance, Ai Xiaoxi put her hand on her waist and helped her to rub it. Feng Yinshen was still very satisfied with this flattery. By the way, Sister Chen, can you tell me about the man we are going to see later? Seeing that Feng Yinshen was in a good mood, Ai Xiaoxi asked her in a low voice. Oh, I will tell you. Maybe she was in a good mood, so Feng Yinshen did not introduce Jiang Hai's situation. The person we'll meet in a while is called Jiang Hai. He's my former classmate. As for his age, he's about the same age as me. You can call him Brother Jiang. His home is in Boston, but as for what he does specifically, he said that he raises cattle. I'm not very clear about the situation. Hearing Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yinshen said to her with 70% truth and 30% lies. If she really didn't understand what kind of tricks Jiang Hai had, she would be crazy to be with Jiang Hai. Oh, I see. Hearing Feng Yinshen's words, Ai Xiaoxi naturally did not believe all of it, but hearing her words, an image also appeared in her mind. The image of a dark-skinned, tall, and not handsome cowherd boy appeared in her mind. It was deeply rooted and could not be driven away. Just as she was thinking about how to deal with him these days, The plane had slowly landed at JFK Airport. There are 3 airports in New York, the most famous of which is naturally Kennedy Airport, located in Queens. Its throughput accounts for more than 30% of all routes in the United States. The second is Guarati Airport, located 13 kilometers east of Manhattan, in the northern part of Long Island. It is relatively small. This is an airport specially prepared by New York to deal with Huaxia passengers. It is dedicated to flying to Huaxia. Its passenger ratio is 5.8%, almost all of them flying to Huaxia. The other one is Newark Airport, but it is not so much for flying to New York as it is for flying to New Jersey, because this airport is located in New Jersey, not in New York. This time, Feng Yinshan and Ai Xiaoxi flew to Guarati. Fortunately, Jiang Hai checked the flights before, or they would have flown to JFK. When Feng Yinshan and Ai Xiaoxi came out with several large suitcases, it was already past 1 o'clock in the afternoon local time. When they just got off the plane, Feng Yinshan called Jiang Hai. After learning that Jiang Hai was in the parking lot, she carried her luggage and took Ai Xiaoxi to the parking lot. After entering the parking lot, Ai Xiaoxi was very nervous. After all, she was in a foreign country, and she was a little curious. Looking at the Jiang Hai, who meet her standards, she couldn't help but guess in her heart. Which one is he? But from the looks of it now, it doesn't seem to be any of them, because what she saw Feng Yinshan saw. But obviously, Feng Yinshan ignored it. Although she only saw Jiang Hai, stayed with him for 1 night, she still recognized Jiang Hai's appearance. The two carried their luggage and walked like this, looking forward. After walking for about 10 minutes, Feng Yinshan, who was walking in front, couldn't help but brighten up and waved her hand. Seeing her appearance, Ai Xiaoxi knew that she had found her target. She immediately looked into the distance and found that at this time, a man was standing in the distance and waving to this side. She rubbed her eyes and looked at the man. It seemed this man was completely different from what she imagined. This man looked very tall. She wasn't sure exactly how tall he was, but he was definitely taller than the people around him. Even Old Bai and Old Hay weren't as tall as him. At this moment, he was wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt, an outdoor shirt, and a pair of outdoor trousers. There were many pockets, and the t-shirt inside was faintly sticking to his muscles. Although she couldn't see clearly, Ai Xiaoxi was still a little surprised. He was wearing a pair of sunglasses on his not-so-handsome face. This image was completely different from the image of a cowherd boy in her imagination. As for what surprised her even more, at this time, there was a car parked next to this man. If she wasn't mistaken, it seemed to be a Rolls-Royce. And it wasn't a Rolls-Royce, but a very good brand. She didn't know what the specific name was, but this car was rare in the capital. Could it be that raising cattle in the United States is really so profitable? Hey, you're here? Just when she was puzzled, the two had already arrived next to Jiang Hai. Feng Yinshan, on the other side, pounced on Jiang Hai without saying a word, and then hugged Jiang Hai tightly, her face full of excitement and joy. This scene made Ai Xiaoxi confused again. What's going on? Hey, okay, there are outsiders. Feeling Feng Yinshan's enthusiasm, this made Jiang Hai a little overwhelmed. He opened his hands, carefully patted her back and said to her, Hey, Xiaoxi is not an outsider. This is my colleague Ai Xiaoxi, and this is Jiang Hai. You can call him Brother Jiang. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, at this time, Feng Yinshan seemed to remember that she didn't come alone, so she took the initiative to jump down from Jiang Hai's body, naturally holding Jiang Hai's arm, and introduced her to Ai Xiaoxi behind her. Hello Brother Jiang, my name is Ai Xiaoxi. Hearing Feng Yinshan's words, Ai Xiaoxi immediately stood on her feet and respectfully reached out to Jiang Hai. The two shook hands lightly, and Jiang Hai took the initiative to let go. Don't be nervous, I'm here for all of this. Have you had lunch? I'll take you to eat first. Then do you want to play around in New York before going back, or go back directly? Looking at Ai Xiaoxi's nervous look, Jiang Hai also smiled. But after saying a word to her, he looked at Feng Yinshan and asked her. It was said that it was a good thing to meet an old friend in a foreign land. Not to mention that this old friend might have something to do with him. So Jiang Hai was indeed very enthusiastic about this unfamiliar Feng Yunshan. We ate on the plane, so we're not hungry now. Besides, we have to take photos, so we need snacks for the next few days. Let's go back directly. Didn't you say that it would take 3 hours to drive back from here? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan glanced at Ai Xiaoxi and found that she also had a tired look on her face, so she smiled and took the initiative to speak. That's fine. Let's come back when we have time. In fact, to be honest, there is really nothing to visit in New York. Coming here is just for fun. When I take you back in a while, let's walk around and see the attractions that we should see. Then we can leave. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then took the initiative to help the two girls put their luggage into the trunk. But when he put it in, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. These two girls are very powerful. The luggage is so heavy, how did they get it? He had to admit that Jiang Hai was still too naive. He somewhat underestimated the enthusiasm of Chinese men to please beautiful women. These big boxes, except for the time when they were pushed on the trolley, they hardly touched them. Chapter 330. Jiang Hai, is this your car? Sitting in Jiang Hai's Rolls-Royce, Feng Yunshan was still looking around. In fact, it was her first time sitting in such a car. The person behind her in China was nothing more than an entry-level luxury car, Bentley Speedster. She already thought that it was a top-level luxury car. Compared with Jiang Hai's Rolls-Royce Phantom Extended, it is indeed more than one grade worse. The most important thing is that Jiang Hai's car is still the best configuration. Sitting on the handmade calf leather seat, the feeling is really different. Although she doesn't like cars as much as men, she also knows that this car is about 7 or 8 million yuan in China. Yes, you are the first passengers of this car. I originally bought 3 pickup trucks, the big pickup truck of Ford, one F650 and 2 F750. But later I met a group of friends who went hunting in the mountains. They told me that what kind of car has what kind of function, like a sedan. It is used to pick people up. An off-road vehicle is used to go out and play. An MVP is used for family travel. And no matter how good a pickup truck is, it is just a pickup truck. I listened to him and bought other kinds of cars. Hearing Feng Yunshan's doubtful voice from behind, Jiang Hai also said with a smile, "There is such a saying, are there any other cars in your house?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but laugh. Although she doesn't like cars, it doesn't prevent her from talking to Jiang Hai about what Jiang Hai likes. There is also a Ford E350, which is a business car, which can seat a lot of people, and a Braille Shield, which can also seat a lot of people, which is an off-road vehicle. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also replied, "No sports car." Hearing this, Ai Xiaoxi, who has been sitting next to Feng Yunshan, couldn't help but interject. Compared with Feng Yunshan, Ai Xiaoxi knows less about cars. In her opinion, no matter how good a car is, it is not as good as a sports car. No. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai can't help but feel a little embarrassed. He really doesn't have a sports car. Oh. Hearing the awkwardness in Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but smile brightly, as if she had said something wrong. "You stupid girl, this car is much more expensive than the average sports car. When the time comes, we can also shoot a movie in this car. Jiang Hai shouldn't have any problems, right?" Hearing Ai Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but look at her and said happily, "Whatever you like." Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also smiled. He didn't care about these things. It was said that the car was a man's lover, but this point was actually indifferent to Jiang Hai. People who have a good relationship in China can borrow cars, let alone Jiang Hai. To be honest, his cars, except for his Shield, he doesn't care much about the other cars. We live in Winthrop, which is half of the countryside. The road there is not very good, so we can't run with a sports car. We also need to raise the suspension, but if the suspension of a sports car is raised, it will be a little dangerous. When we run too fast, we may overturn if we are not careful, so I don't need that car. After agreeing to Feng Yunshan's request to borrow the car, Jiang Hai also explained to Ai Xiaoxi. Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but stick out her tongue. "Okay, get your phone ready, Statue of Liberty is here." Just when the atmosphere in the car was a little difficult to find a topic to talk about, Jiang Hai's voice also sounded in front, and Feng Yunshin and Ai Xiaoxi in the back also took out their mobile phones for the first time, and one of them looked outside seriously. As Jiang Hai said, in fact, in New York there are not many scenic spots to see. If you just come to shop, then this is a paradise. Things are cheap and there is a wide variety, but if you come to travel and play, there are not many places to play here. The most famous scenic spot here is the statue of Goddess of Nature, but it is just a statue. What is there to see? Ground Zeroes is the site of 9/11. For Americans, it is a pain that can never be forgotten, but for people like Jiang Hai, it is the place where the incident happened. And what is there to see in a ruin? Broadway is a place where opera is performed. How many people can understand it? Wall Street is the financial center. Similarly, who can understand it? Central Park is a park, the United Nations headquarters is a building, and the Empire State Building is not the tallest. The New York train station is under Madison Square Garden. It may be interesting to watch basketball, but they won't go if they don't watch basketball. Times Square. If it is not New Year's Eve, there is really no meaning to go there. The only place to see is the art museum, but obviously, neither Ai Xiaoxi nor Feng Yunshin is interested in those things. After taking some photos happily, the three of them strolled around New York City again. In fact, for Feng Yunshin and Ai Xiaoxi, the best place to visit was actually Fifth Avenue, which was the luxury street. However, they were destined not to visit today. Fortunately, they have to take a flight from New York when they leave, so they can come back later. Jiang Hai didn't care. He simply strolled around New York City. It was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Jiang Hai drove directly, left New York, and went to Boston. After more than 10 hours of flight, it is impossible to say that the two girls are not tired. When they were in New York City, the car stopped, and there were some scenery to see, so they couldn't fall asleep. However, less than 10 minutes after leaving the city, the two girls leaned against the car window, one on the left and one on the right. Although the scenery outside was good, they were not in the mood to look at it. Jiang Hai also noticed the situation of the two girls, so he took the initiative to close the car window and turned on the air conditioner. This time period is not much different from May in the north. The temperature is not high, nor is it low. In fact, it is quite comfortable to open the car window. There is no need to turn on the air conditioner. But Jiang Hai still turned on the air conditioner, because he was afraid that the two girls would be uncomfortable. When they arrived at the rest stop in front of Boston, Jiang Hai woke the two girls up. After they went to the bathroom and rested for a while, the three of them set off again and returned to Jiang Hai's Winthrop Manor. "We are here." As the car got closer and closer, Jiang Hai also greeted the two girls who were still sleepy in the back. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two girls also forced themselves to sit up straight from their seats. Although the jet lag and fatigue were about to destroy them, they couldn't help but sigh when they looked at the scenery in front of them. At this time, although the night has not yet fallen, the sun has gradually set in the west. What greeted their eyes was a picturesque scene. The fiery clouds on the horizon were floating above the sky. Under the fiery clouds, they could only see the endless grassland in the distance. At the end of the grassland and the clouds, there was a faintly visible sea. Such a scene, coupled with a huge number of cows moving toward the cowshed, really gave their souls a heavy blow. "So beautiful." Looking at the scene in front of her, Ai Xiaoxi muttered unconsciously. At this time, the deep-rooted image of a cowherd boy in her mind had collapsed at this time. It seems that Feng Yunshin is right, this Jiang Hai is very rich. Hearing her voice, Jiang Hai also smiled, then pressed the password at the door. The door opened. Jiang Hai also drove to the front of his villa. When the car stopped in the parking lot of the living area, Feng Yunshin and Ai Xiaoxi were even more surprised. Because at this time in their eyes, Jiang Hai's cars were all parked in this parking lot. They had never heard of the War Shield. Although it was not the biggest among them, it was the most conspicuous. The rough feeling of a soldier was really shocking. In addition to this car, the three pickup trucks in Jiang Hai's mouth also made them open their mouths in surprise. Although they don't know much about these cars, they have seen them before. For example, they are very popular in the country. The F-150, which was considered a good car, was like a baby in front of these three behemoths. Looking at these cars, they know that these cars are actually good cars. All of them are quite good cars. In addition to the cars, when they saw the well-located villa and Jiang Hai's big villa, their surprised expression was even more vivid on their faces. In fact, Feng Yunshan is also a little confused now, because she only knows that Jiang Hai raises cattle in the United States and has some money, but she really didn't know that Jiang Hai actually has so much money. Too amazing. Ai Xiaoxi thought for a long time, but she still can't think of a way to describe her current mood and everything in front of her. She didn't know what to say other than too amazing. Well, these days you can see it whenever you want. It's getting dark, you must be hungry. I'll take you to your room first, then have dinner, and you can have a good rest. Hearing the surprised sigh of the two girls in front of him, Jiang Hai's vanity was greatly satisfied. After clapping his hands to attract the attention of the two girls, Jiang Hai said to the two girls while carrying the luggage. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two girls also looked away with some embarrassment. But their eyes were full of curiosity when they looked at Jiang Hai. They really can't see it. Is Jiang Hai really so rich? Regardless of their gaze, Jiang Hai carried those things and walked into his house. But as soon as the door opened, Xiao Huang, Xiao Bai, Qiu Qiu, and Dai Teeth had already rushed out. Seeing Jiang Hai carrying things, they took the initiative to come over. These are not for you, get out of the way, Jiang Hai said with a smile as he kicked the four little guys around him. At this time, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi also walked into the room. The moment they walked in, the four guys over there looked at them for the first time. And when they saw these animals, they couldn't help but be shocked. Chapter 331. These are. When they walked in, the four pets, who were still playing around, fixed their gazes on the two women almost instantly. Dai Feng was fine, and the snow squirrel, who was originally very cute, was also very cute when it tilted its head and looked at them. However, Qiu Qiu, Lil Yellow, and Lil White, who had already matured, were not so friendly. Goldie's wolf-like eyes stared at them indifferently, causing goosebumps to appear all over their bodies. Although Xiao Bai did not have wolf-like eyes, its huge body looked very intimidating just by standing there. As for Qiu Qiu, it was like a wild beast. The way it looked at the two ladies made it seem like it was treating them as food. Feeling the gazes of these beasts and birds of prey, the two of them could not help but stop in their tracks. Don't scare the guests. Don't worry, these are my pets. They won't take the initiative to attack people. Seeing that the two girls seemed to be very scared, Jiang Hai also kicked these guys. Under Jiang Hai's foot, these guys changed very quickly. Goldie was used to being cold, so it just glanced at them and turned to leave. Xiao Bai, Dai Feng, and Chirpy were much more despicable. The three little guys skipped in front of the two girls and sniffed with their noses. However, other than Dai Feng, the two girls had no immunity to these things. Okay, go play by yourself. Seeing that the two of them were so scared that they did not dare to move, Jiang Hai put down his luggage and walked over. After driving these guys away, he took the two of them upstairs. In the past, I only heard that those rich people raised ferocious beasts. I didn't quite believe it, but now it seems that I was too naive. Behind Jiang Hai, Feng Yunshan said with a smile. In the past, there were a lot of news about this kind of thing, but they just read it with a joking attitude. Now that they saw it, they were also a little scared. Actually, they are not ferocious beasts. The first one to leave is Goldie, a Tibetan Mastiff. The black one is Xiao Bai, a Caucasian dog. They are all pet dogs. Dai Feng is a snow squirrel. I picked it up in the forest of this manor. As for Chirpy, it is indeed a bird of prey. It is the national bird of the United States, the bald eagle, but it is not an adult yet. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai also explained with a smile. Although they knew that those two guys were dogs, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi still felt a little scared. They followed Jiang Hai all the way to the second floor and breathed a sigh of relief. But before they could completely relax, they saw a door not far from them open, and the figures of Delina and Marian also emerged from there. Hey Jiang Hai, you are back. Looking at Jiang Hai and the two women, the two girls were a little surprised. Just now, Jiang Hai did tell them that he was going to pick someone up, but he didn't say that he was going to pick up women. Oh, you are back. Come, let me introduce you. These two are the two who will stay with us for a few days from today. Aunties? This is my high school classmate, Feng Yunchen. This is Ai Xiaoxi. And these two are my daughters, Delina and Marian. Seeing them come out, after all, they are going to live under the same roof. So Jiang Hai also introduced them with a smile. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the two women's faces were a little embarrassed. First, because of the title of auntie, they always thought that they were very young, okay? Feng Yunchen may be worthy of this title. After all, she is the same age as Jiang Hai. But Ai Xiaoxi was actually born in 1994. She was only 22 years old this year. At this time, Delina and Marian, who were already 15 years old, called them aunties. How depressed are they? In fact, this time they didn't know that Jiang Hai had two daughters this old. Kissing was definitely impossible. So the only possibility was that they did it, or was it recognized? But in any case, they are also two daughters. And it seems that they didn't bring any gifts. Hello, just call us by our names. Calling us aunties makes us sound old. You are so cute. As expected of a veteran who has been in society for so many years. When Ai Xiaoxi was still a little confused, Feng Yunchen had already reacted. She smiled and walked forward first. After shaking hands with the two girls, she introduced herself. Looking at the appearance of Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi, Delina and Marian looked at each other. They were very sure that these two women must have a relationship with Jiang Hai. It was very likely that it was a relationship between a man and a woman. This was also a woman's intuition. Okay, you can play by yourselves first, I will take them to the room. Seeing that the relationship between the four women was a little subtle, Jiang Hai hurriedly said to break the deadlock. After saying something to Delina and Marian, Jiang Hai took the luggage to the depths of the second floor, where he had already prepared two rooms. You can live here. These two rooms have independent bathrooms and small living rooms. After coming to the front of the room, Jiang Hai also opened the door of the room and introduced it to them with a smile. For his room here, Jiang Hai was very satisfied. Wow, it's quite good. The two women looked at the layout of the room and couldn't help but exclaim softly. Indeed, the layout of the room was beyond their imagination. Originally, the two of them were prepared to suffer, but they didn't expect that Jiang Hai was really a rich man. The room he arranged for them was also quite luxurious. This room was not worse than a business suite in a five-star hotel. It was just that there was only one room. The whole room had a quite luxurious layout. There was an independent air conditioner, TV, living room, bathroom, solid wood floor plus a big bed. Everything was a bit beyond their expectations. Forget about the two rooms. When we leave, you'll have to tidy it up. I think this bed can fit 3 to 5 people. Let's share a room with the two of us. It'll be easier for us to talk at night. Looking at Ai Xiaoxi, who was already a little shocked, Feng Yunchen immediately said. In fact, it was not that she really had a good relationship with Ai Xiaoxi, nor that she really liked to sleep with others, but because she still had some things to discuss with Ai Xiaoxi. Oh, then it's up to you. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Is there anyone in this world who doesn't like to sleep alone? Jiang Hai didn't know, but since they said so, Jiang Hai won't care. If you can't sleep well, you can also sleep in the guest room next door. Only me, Daliana, and Marian live here, but I have more than a dozen rooms here. There is enough space. Smiling at the two, Jiang Hai explained. Well, you have been on the plane for more than 10 hours, plus more than 4 hours in the car. You are probably tired. I will go down to prepare food now. You can rest and come down to eat. After eating, you can sleep well. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai also said with a smile, then left the room. The moment Jiang Hai left the room, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief and looked at Feng Yunchen with some complaints. Sister Chen, you didn't say that your classmate is a rich man. Looking at Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi said helplessly. Didn't I say? Haha, well, in fact, I didn't know he was a rich man. Shrugging, Feng Yunchen smiled self-deprecatingly. Although she had an unforgettable night with Jiang Hai, she only saw Jiang Hai's watch. Looking at Jiang Hai's residence in China, It is hard to imagine that he is a rich man. So in her opinion, Jiang Hai is estimated to be a farmer, with a few tens of millions of yuan in the United States, that's all. But at this time, when she came over to take a look, she had to sigh. It seems that Qi Li is indeed not blind. This Jiang Hai is a bit interesting. For the first time, the idea of relying on Jiang Hai appeared in her mind. Maybe this is a good choice. This villa, this grassland, did he say that he has a forest? By the way, there is also a sea god, I thought. Listening to Feng Yunshan's unreliable laughter, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but sit on the sofa and said helplessly. What did you think? I thought he was a poor boy. Okay, little girl, don't be silly, get up quickly, open the box and take out the clothes. Glancing at Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but stand up and began to open their big box. What are you going to do with the clothes? Although a little curious, Ai Xiaoxi still stood up and helped Feng Yunshan pick 2 good-looking clothes and give them to his 2 daughters. I didn't know that he had a mistress in the United States, but since we are here, since they call us aunties, this gift is indispensable. Glancing at Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunshan also said with some helplessness. After listening to her words, Ai Xiaoxi was even more bored. She is only 22 years old, and she is already an auntie. It would be fine if the other party is a little child. But the other party doesn't seem to be much younger than her. It is indeed a bit of a loss to be an auntie so inexplicably. But as Feng Yunshan said, whether she accepts it or not, this matter exists so she can only give things. After opening the big boxes, countless clothes appeared in their line of sight in an instant. These clothes are all theirs, but they are not for them to wear, but for shooting. They came here this time to shoot a photo shoot. Naturally, it is impossible to only wear 1 or 2 sets for the photo shoot. Naturally, they have to shoot a lot of sets. These clothes also have to be brought over. Looking at these clothes, they are a little tangled. It is not that the clothes are bad. The clothes here are not bad, whether it is the quality or the price. Many of them are new, but these clothes are too sexy to give to a 15 or 16-year-old girl. Chapter 332. Some words were written in front by Xiao Fei. Actually, Xiao Fei did not want to guard against such things. Xiao Fei was also very tired. Wouldn't it be better to just send it directly? Xiao Fei could save himself the trouble. This was because if he did not guard against it, Xiao Fei might really starve to death. Xiao Fei had entered the industry early, but before that, he had gone out to work. He had installed computers for others at the computer city, and had also installed systems in other people's homes. Since 2010, when he took control of the ball, he had started working full-time. To be honest, he had indeed earned some money in those few years. It had also given Xiao Fei the desire to continue. The best book, Taking Control of the Ball, had an average subscription of 2,888. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a high-quality book. But ever since the 3 years of turmoil in the online literature industry, competitive novels had started to decline. Xiao Fei had no choice. Xiao Fei had to eat, so he chose to change his genre. But the path of changing genres was very difficult. Xiao Fei had thought about this a long time ago. What was valuable was perseverance. If he continued to stay there, he might not have a future. Then he could only take the risk and go out to explore. Xiao Fei had written 2 urban novels in 2 years. This was the second one. Perhaps the structure of the story had not been recognized by everyone. But people improved slowly. Xiao Fei also believed that he still had some room for improvement. But the prerequisite was that Xiao Fei did not starve to death. Only then could he continue. Everyone's subscription earned Xiao Fei 2 cents for every 1,000 words. One of the cents was from the website that had just been opened a few years ago. A chapter of 3,000 words was 1 subscription. Xiao Fei earned 6 cents, and there was still the addition of coins. Originally, the average subscription of this book was about 700. On a good day, Xiao Fei would publish 3 chapters, and there would be about 2,000 new subscriptions every day. 1 subscription cost 6 cents, which was 120 yuan. But most of the time, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there would only be about 1,000 new subscriptions, which was 60 yuan. Xiao Fei was not afraid of being laughed at. Xiao Fei's January royalties were 2,200 yuan, and there was still a tax deduction. It was said to be 20%, but it was actually 11%. There was still more than 200 yuan to be deducted. Xiao Fei really had no choice but to earn less than 2,000 yuan a month. Now that he was on guard, based on the current growth rate, he could earn more than 3,000 a month. Not to mention other things, it was enough for Xiao Fei to eat. Xiao Fei really didn't want everyone to go through so much trouble. He still had to delete the bookshelves and wait for the next update. But let's put ourselves in their shoes. As long as Xiao Fei was still able to get by, Xiao Fei wouldn't be able to guard against this thing. Xiao Fei was only like this because he had no other choice. Therefore, even though he was extremely apologetic to everyone, Xiao Fei still had to shamelessly guard against it. In the end, Xiao Fei could only ask for everyone's understanding. Writing a novel was not easy, so Xiao Fei could only treasure it. He begged everyone. Chapter 333. Hey, you guys are here. Come and have a seat, it's time for dinner. Listening to the sound of footsteps, Jiang Hai also looked up at the stairs and found Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi slowly walking down the stairs. It could be seen that after such a short rest, the two girls were indeed a lot more energetic. Their originally pale faces had also become healthy at this time. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two also looked at each other and quickly walked to the table. As soon as they sat down, Daliana and Marian walked out of the kitchen with food in their hands. After all, it wasn't a formal reception, so Jiang Hai didn't ask Mrs. Philemon to come over to help. Instead, he made the food himself. However, although he made it himself, the food was all good. Jiang Hai made a total of 6 dishes today. Fried steak and lobster were inevitable. Fried steak was a must here. Although lobster wasn't very popular here, at least it couldn't be compared to beef. But in China, it was the best food. Fried fish strips were also a must. There was also a large plate of boiled crabs and shrimps, a plate of scallion fried sea cucumber, and a large plate of vegetable salad. These were the dishes for tonight. Although there was more meat than vegetables, except for beef, the other fats weren't too high. Besides, they were all raised by him, so the taste was naturally better. Hey, hello, we're here to help. We came in a hurry this time, so here are the gifts I prepared for you. Looking at Delina and Marian, Feng Yunshan chuckled as she motioned Ai Xiaoxi to help her. At the same time, she and Ai Xiaoxi picked out 2 pieces of clothes that were not that sexy. Both clothes were new, and they hadn't worn them before. They were specially bought for this shoot. It was not expensive, only 200 to 300 RMB, but it was also a token of their sincerity. Thank you. After receiving the clothes from Feng Yunshan's hands, the 2 girls were stunned for a moment. Fortunately, they didn't stay in a daze for too long. Daliana spoke first. Hearing Daliana's words, Marian also nodded to express her gratitude. You're welcome. Hey Xiaoxi, let's go and help. Hearing the words of the 2 girls, Feng Yunshan stood up with a smile. But just as she was about to go to the kitchen to help, she found that Ai Xiaoxi, who had been called to help, was still standing there, which made her a little unhappy. Does she still think this is her own home? He didn't have any foresight at all. Sis Chin, this is a lobster, right? But after hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Ai Xiaoxi didn't immediately help. Instead, she stuttered. Hearing her words, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but frown. Has she never seen food before? What was so surprising about lobsters? In their line of work, there were plenty of dinners and drinking parties. Lobsters were a common occurrence. However, just as she was about to turn around and reprimand Ai Xiaoxi, her eyes unconsciously widened. Because at this moment, the lobsters in front of them were indeed a little out of common sense. Is this a lobster? Oh, it's a little big. Looking at the lobster lying on the grill, from head to tail, excluding the pincers, it was about 80 centimeters long. They subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said in disbelief. In China, a 2-foot-long lobster costs more than 1,000 yuan. This is a consensus, whether it's an Australian lobster or a Boston lobster. A lobster is a lobster, although it's the patent of the nouveau riche. After all, people without money can't afford it. And the bigger the lobster, the more valuable it is. This is also inevitable. Jianghai's lobster, if sold in China, would cost less than 50 to 60,000 yuan, let alone eating it. You might not even be allowed to look at it. In a seafood restaurant, lobsters of this level would be treated as the treasure of the restaurant. Jianghai's lobster, from the tail to the tip of the pincers, is 87.2 centimeters long, weighing a total of 14.8 kilograms. A 30-pound lobster, according to the market price of 100 yuan, is worth more than 3,000 yuan. Not to mention, it's so big and so heavy. Looking at this lobster, even Feng Yunshan was a little stunned. This was a toy. Even if it was a first-class round-trip ticket, it could also be exchanged for half a car. And it would be the kind that costs more than 100,000 yuan. This is our own lobster. Jiang Hai specially asked Uncle Anderson to get it today. It's so big, and we don't have a lot of them here, so we still need to pick one. It looks like it's bigger than the last time when Jiang Hai's other friend came. Seeing Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi's stunned expression, Daliana also said with a smile. Although she still has her guard up against these two women who gave her gifts, it doesn't matter if she explains it to them. Do you often eat this kind of lobster here? Hearing Daliana's words, Ai Xiaoxi seemed to react. She pointed at the lobster in disbelief and asked Daliana. Of course, Jiang Hai liked to eat lobsters for a while. He ate them almost every day. Basically, they are about the same size as this one. Some are bigger than this one, and some are smaller than this one. He doesn't eat small ones. Hearing Ai Xiaoxi's stunned words, Marian also said in a charming voice. Hearing these two girls' words, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan glanced at each other, thinking, what a waste. Cough lobster, let's eat it in a while. Let's go help them. Smiling awkwardly, the two walked into the kitchen with their heads lowered. As soon as they walked in, they smelled the aroma of the steak that Jiang Hai was frying. Hey, you're here, just in time to serve the dishes. The steak can be eaten after frying it. Seeing them walking in, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. But thinking of the customs in China, when they come to the host's house as guests, as women, they naturally have to come and help. Jiang Hai didn't care about it. He pointed to the already prepared salad, fried fish sticks, boiled crab and prawns, and prepared sea cucumber with scallion on the table. Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. No need to be so troublesome, just a home-cooked meal will do. This is really too lousy. After hesitating for a while, Ai Xiaoxi whispered to Jiang Hai. Except for that big lobster, the price of these things is definitely not low in China. Hey, what do you mean by lousy? These things are produced in my manor. We usually eat them like this. You came a little early. If you come at this time next year, my manor also has home-brewed red wine. I think the taste will be very good. Hearing Ai Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai also waved his hand casually. These things are indeed just home-cooked dishes. Well, let's take them out. Seeing that Jiang Hai really didn't care, Feng Yunshan also gestured to Ai Xiaoxi. The two walked out with 2 plates of dishes. After putting them down, they came back with 2 plates. As for Delina and Marian, they went back to put their clothes. To be honest, at this age, especially the precocious Delina and Marian, they were actually very interested in these little sexy clothes in their hearts. It's just that Jiang Hai didn't let them buy or wear it. They were also helpless about this. As for Sheikh Clive, it was even more impossible. Come on, let's eat. Finally, holding a basket of bread and a basket of fried steak, Jiang Hai walked out of the kitchen. Delina and Marian had also come down at this time, and they set up knives, forks, and tableware for the 5 seats. The 5 people sat down and were ready to eat, but Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan hesitated for a long time with the knives and forks in their hands. They didn't know which one to start with, because these things in front of them, to be honest, were really fun. Let's eat this first. After hesitating for a while, they decided to eat the lobsters first. Although the lobsters in Jiang Hai's place are just ordinary Arctic lobsters, the spotted lobsters and bamboo lobsters he bought haven't grown up yet. Although after a few months of growth, these lobsters are much heavier than the ordinary lobsters raised for 180 days. Almost each of them weighs nearly 1 or 2 grams, but they haven't grown up yet. Jiang Hai raised these lobsters because he expects them to produce seeds here, so he won't catch them so easily. But even the Arctic lobsters, which are not valuable in China, have undergone obvious changes after being raised by Jianghai with seaweed promoted by spiritual energy for so long. One of them is that they have become bigger. Generally speaking, because the Arctic lobsters are 150 meters below sea level, their growth rate is very slow, and their meat is very tight. They were small in size too. A prawn weighed about 8 to 10 grams, and this was considered a big prawn, not a small one. The Arctic lobsters Jianghai originally caught are about the same size, about 40 to 50 per catty. But since Jianghai began to shift his focus to the sea, the weight of the Arctic lobsters Jianghai caught has also increased rapidly. Now a lobster is not smaller than an ordinary big green lobster. Almost each of them weighs about half a kilogram, which is about 25 grams. It has to be admitted that such low-end creatures need much less spiritual energy to break through the limit. It's not that such big Arctic lobsters don't exist in this world, but even if there are, the price is not ordinary. While peeling the lobsters, Feng Yinshan is guessing what kind of lobster this is. She has eaten Arctic lobsters before, but this lobster doesn't look like it. Until she finished peeling and put the lobster into her mouth, her eyes subconsciously narrowed. The firm texture of the Arctic lobsters, coupled with the special sweetness of the deep-sea creatures, instantly hit her stomach. It made her feel uncomfortable. On the other side, Ai Xiaoxi is feeling even worse now. Because she ate a crab. Jianghai raised king crabs, but they are not ready to be eaten yet. What they caught now were Portunus crabs, but they were quite large. Each of these Portunus crabs weighed close to a catty. Such large Portunus crabs were sold for 100 yuan per catty in China, and that was under the off-season. Chapter 334. If it was around November, people would charge you 120 renminbi per catty for such fat swimming crabs. It was like Bing City, where the cost of living was not high, and it was not far from the sea. Jianghai heard from one of his friends in Sichuan that the live prawns sold there were not only small prawns, but also ordinary prawns. They were very small, but they were sold for nearly 100 renminbi per catty. In the past 2 years it was cheaper, but it was still more than 80 renminbi per catty. Eating crabs in such a place, it was really not something that ordinary people could afford. Although things in the sea were expensive, things in the river, such as crayfish, were very cheap. Ai Xiaoxi's home was not in Sichuan, so she often ate seafood, but this was the first time she ate such delicious crabs. This taste, it's great. When the two recovered from the shock, they couldn't help but look at each other. Ai Xiaoxi also whispered, but although her voice was not loud, Jianghai still heard it clearly. If you think it's delicious, eat more. This lobster is not bad, and the sea cucumber is very big. Yes, and the most important thing is this beef. This is actually the most expensive and valuable thing on this table. Looking at Feng Yinshan and Ai Xiaoxi, Jianghai smiled and introduced them. When they heard Jianghai's words, they stopped eating. You mean this beef is valuable? How valuable can it be? More valuable than the lobster? Feng Yinshan curiously forked a piece of beef and cut it first. She had to admit that Jianghai's beef felt good. Although the table knife was not sharp, it cut all the tendons in the beef in an instant. The cut was neat. Although it was fully cooked, the skin of the beef was blackened, and there was fresh red meat inside. If there was no blood flowing down, she might have thought that it was not cooked at all. Looking at this piece of beef, Feng Yinshan stuffed it into her mouth. To be honest, she did not believe that beef would be more expensive than lobster. But the moment the beef was stuffed into her mouth, the fragrance of the beef rushed directly into her mind. She subconsciously took a bite, and the delicious gravy that was tightly held in the beef seemed to explode, rushing into her mouth. The chewy feeling made her unconsciously move her jaw to make herself chew faster. At this moment, Feng Yinshan felt as if his soul had floated to another world. There were blue skies, white clouds, and green grasslands. On the grasslands, there were lively cows looking for food and chasing each other. This was the power of nature. Just as she was immersed in such thoughts and unable to extricate herself, she felt her body being pushed. Only then did she extricate herself from that feeling and look blankly to her side. Sister Chen? Sister Chen? Looking at Feng Yunshen's dumbfounded expression, Xiaoxi couldn't help but panic a little. She couldn't help but gently nudge her. Seeing that she had woken up, she couldn't help but look at her awkwardly. This beef is amazing. But at this time, Feng Yunshen did not have the leisure and time to pay attention to AI Xiaoxi. Instead, she turned her head directly and looked at Jiang Hai. She cut a piece of beef and stuffed it into her mouth while speaking hurriedly. Of course, if I sell this beef, I will sell it for about $400 per pound. Lobster is only a few dollars. Hearing Feng Yunshen's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He is quite confident in his beef. Now he has confidence in the beef, but soon, he will also have confidence in the fish. $400 per pound? $400 is equal to 2,600 renminbi. 1 pound is about 9 taels. Oh my god, you want to sell a pound of beef for 3,000 renminbi? On the other side, AI Xiaoxi, who has not eaten yet, originally wanted to try it after listening to Feng Yunshen's words. But after hearing Jiang Hai's words, her hand that was about to put the beef into her mouth trembled unconsciously. It's okay. Eat as much as you want. Look at how scared you are. Seeing her reaction, Jiang Hai was very satisfied. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, AI Xiaoxi still had some doubts in her heart. But since she is already here, it would be a pity if she didn't try it. So after hesitating for a while, she decided to eat it. Anyway, it won't kill her. When she took a bite, she instantly felt that the first half of her life was really wasted. At least in terms of food. Looking at Jiang Hai, who she thought was a cowherd, AI Xiaoxi suddenly wanted to cry. A pound of beef can be sold for almost as much as a student who just graduated from school. What's the use of going to school with a month's salary? What's the use of going through hardships in society? Look at Jiang Hai, it's so easy. He eats lobster and beef every day. And the money he earns is equivalent to what other people earn in several lifetimes. This kind of satisfaction almost makes her excited, okay? Looking at Jiang Hai and thinking about herself, AI Xiaoxi suddenly had the urge to cry. But fortunately, she forced herself to endure it. But her mood was depressed for no reason. But no matter how depressed her mood is, it can't stop her from eating, because she doesn't know if she will have a chance to eat these things again in the future. Seeing that she stopped talking, Feng Yunshen also sped up her eating pace. She was simply afraid that there would not be enough to eat. However, it was obvious that she was thinking too much and overestimating herself. Jiang Hai made 10 pounds of beef, a total of 20 pieces. They couldn't finish the beef alone, plus 30 pounds of lobsters, crabs, Arctic shrimp, and sea cucumbers. Naturally, they couldn't finish the rest. As for the rest, Jiang Hai basically fed it to the dogs. Well, rich people can be so capricious. After about an hour or so, Feng Yunshen and AI Xiaoxi really can't eat anymore. And they both lay on the chair without any image. Jiang Hai, I have never envied others in my life, because others are others. Life is given by God. It's not something you can fight for. So I have always believed that I can live a better life with my own efforts. I don't have any ambition, but now I suddenly envy Chili. If I were the one who married you, would I be able to enjoy such delicious food every day? How can I eat when I go back in the future? Touching her stomach, Feng Yunshen said to Jiang Hai weakly while panting. Then stay, you can eat as much as you want. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't care. After getting up, he tidied up and poured the remaining dishes into the basin next to him. This is the dinner for little Huang and Xiaobai. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jiang Hai, Daliana, and Marian didn't do anything. But Feng Yunshen and AI Xiaoxi on the other side couldn't help but tremble. AI Xiaoxi looked at Feng Yunshen with envy and jealousy. Feng Yunshen has such a big boss behind her. He has so much money, looks good, and can eat so much delicious food every day. Feng Yunshen is going to be rich. But Feng Yunshen's face flashed with a trace of surprise, and also a trace of a bitter smile. If we were in junior high school, I would definitely agree. Looking at Jiang Hai, Feng Yunshen laughed at herself and said firmly, with your junior high school appearance, I don't like you. Haha, let's not talk about it. You guys can move around first. You can also watch TV over there. After digestion, go upstairs and rest. You guys are quite tired. Looking at Feng Yunshen, Jiang Hai laughed jokingly, then walked into the kitchen with the clean plates and basins. Jiang Hai's dishwasher here is also the most advanced. It doesn't need people to use their hands. People only need to pour the leftovers in the plates, and then put the plates in. This machine will wash the plates and bowls according to the size and shape, disinfect them, then dry them, and finally put them in the connected cupboard. Everything is automated, and there is no need for people to do anything. It is precisely because they saw Jiang Hai's fully automated machine that Feng Yunqian and AI Xiaoxi didn't propose to help. Because there is really nothing to help. But when Jiang Hai came out, they went upstairs directly. It's not that they don't want to watch TV or anything, but because the TV here is naturally in English, they can't understand it very well. Their English is limited to communicating with others. Although they have all gone to university and passed CET 4 and CET 6, they are still far from being able to communicate with foreigners normally. The reason why they can communicate with Delina and Marian is that they speak Huaxiao language. Jiang Hai's usual education is not a joke. Back in the room, the two took a shower one after another. After washing their hair, they lay on the big bed without any image, looking at the woman beside her who is much older than her. AI Xiaoxi hesitated and said, "Sister Chin, you should like Jiang Hai, right? Why didn't you agree when Jiang Hai said that you can stay?" Hearing AI Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yunqian, who was still swiping her phone and preparing to upload the photo she took tonight, couldn't help but stop for a moment. Then, as if nothing happened, she continued to swipe her phone. "You are still too young. Let me ask you, is Jiang Hai good?" Without looking at AI Xiaoxi, Feng Yunqian asked alone. "She's rich and not ugly. She's tall and has a good figure. She seems to have a good personality too. Most importantly, she doesn't need to socialize much. She's also very kind. The food here is so good. I feel very good." Hearing Feng Yunqian's words, AI Xiaoxi couldn't help but recall the impression Jiang Hai gave her today. If the full score is 100, this is already 99. One less point is afraid that Jiang Hai will be proud. Of course, if Jiang Hai is shockingly handsome, then 100 points is also possible. You can think of it, but I can't think of it. But have you considered it? Will such a man lack women? Putting down the phone, Feng Yunqian looked at AI Xiaoxi and said very seriously. Hearing her words, AI Xiaoxi also closed her mouth. Just like Feng Yunqian said, such a man will not lack women. Chapter 335. Hehe, maybe you're saying that I'm pretending. You've been in the company for a long time. You should have heard the rumors about me. Hearing AI Xiaoxi's silence, Feng Yunqian laughed at herself, then turned sideways and looked at AI Xiaoxi beside her. "Now that we're fated to sleep in the same bed, I'll tell you. I have a man behind me, but I'm that man's mistress. A few years ago, that man might have come to find me, but in recent years, he hasn't come to find me except for giving me money every month. Maybe you'll think that it's better to find someone like Jiang Hai to be a mistress than to be like this." Looking at AI Xiaoxi, Feng Yunqian didn't seem to care whether she heard it or not. She just kept talking. She seemed to lack someone to talk to. Without giving AI Xiaoxi a chance to speak, Feng Yunqian continued. "Yes, it's really good to be Jiang Hai's mistress, but you have to think about it. There will be many people who like him, and there will be many people who have such thoughts. I can get more from Jiang Hai, but if one day Jiang Hai gets tired of me, or if I want to leave him, I'm really afraid that I can't leave him. I'm afraid that my heart will be tied to him. So if possible, this might be better." Everyone has a story, especially a woman like Feng Yunqian. Her story must be legendary. After all, in Jiang Hai's impression, she should be a good student. Why would she be forced to walk on this road that shouldn't belong to her? Jiang Hai didn't ask, and she didn't tell anyone. But the road under her feet was her own. Her sense of crisis made her unable to rely on anyone. Even if she liked this person very much, just like Jiang Hai, she only wanted to maintain this relationship with him. Maybe this was good for everyone. "Sister Chin, aren't you tired?" Looking at Feng Yunqian's appearance, AI Xiaoxi hesitated and said, "Silly girl. Everything depends on getting used to it. By the way, have you graduated from university?" Perhaps it was AI Xiaoxi's heartache that touched Feng Yunqian's heart, But this made Feng Yunshan, who was always on guard, ask about it. No, not yet, but I've already applied for an internship. She was only 22 years old this year. According to the normal timeline, Xiaoxi should be in her 3rd year of university. Her internship was usually done in her 4th year. She must have her own reasons for doing so in advance. By the way, do you have a boyfriend? Hearing that AI Xiaoxi was willing to talk to her about this, Feng Yunshan asked curiously. There is one. I don't know if he's my boyfriend. We haven't done that before. But we are nominally his girlfriend in the university. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Xiaoxi couldn't help but blush as she whispered. Since you have a boyfriend, why would he let you come here to earn money? Hearing AI Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yunshan was a little speechless. Since you've chosen this path, I think I should make it clear to you that this path isn't easy. If you don't have a backer, you probably don't have one. After all, from the way that perverted manager treated you, it doesn't seem like you have one. Without a backer, it's going to be very tough in this industry. You're quite well off, but you won't be able to take on any car shows or runway shows in the beginning. The best opportunity would be SG, but there are too many people in SG, so it won't be easy to get you to stand out. Other than standing in SG, you'll have to walk out of some small exhibition halls. And the bosses of these small exhibition halls aren't easy to deal with. During dinner parties, they'll have to force you to drink, and they'll even openly throw money at you. If you can really, it's best not to walk in this industry for too long. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, AI Xiaoxi couldn't help but bite her lips. She naturally knew the depth of the water, but she also had her own difficulties. Who asked this industry to make money quickly? This was also the most realistic. Okay, every family has their own difficulties. I won't say more. But you have to be careful, understand? Let's go to sleep. We still have to take photos tomorrow. Seeing AI Xiaoxi biting her lips and not saying anything, Feng Yunshan didn't say anything. She patted her arm, took her quilt and slowly fell asleep. Looking at Feng Yunshan's sleeping face, AI Xiaoxi couldn't help but let out a long sigh. This sister Chen, although her face was cold, her heart was really warm. She sincerely hoped that this good person would have good karma. Looking at her phone, and the name that she had blocked, AI Xiaoxi gently bit her lower lip. In fact, her family didn't want her to enter this industry. After all, this industry's reputation wasn't very good. It was almost like working somewhere in the East. Even if nothing happened, people would think that something happened. Moreover, what was the probability of nothing happening in this industry? Especially her boyfriend, who objected the most fiercely. But in this world, love wasn't enough. She needed money. AI Xiaoxi's family was in a rural area in the country. Her father originally went out to work and injured his leg at a construction site. Although he lost some money, he was fired just like that. Later, in order to treat his leg, he spent all the money he lost. Then her mother got a tumor. Fortunately, it was a good tumor and not cancer. In the end, in order to save her mother, she had to undergo surgery and spent all the money left in the family. But this year, her younger brother, who was in high school, was diagnosed with leukemia and needed a bone marrow transplant. Their family's bone marrow could be transplanted and matched, but the surgery fee was 200,000. In addition to the later stage of recovery, it was 300,000. Her family borrowed all the money, and in the end, they even borrowed from loan sharks to gather 200,000 for the surgery. But the family was almost unable to survive because of the debt. She had to find a way to earn money. If she waited another year and looked for a job after graduation, how could she find a job that was so satisfying? Even if she could find a job, could she earn a few $100,000 a year? One had to know that the compound interest of loan sharks was very fierce. There was no other way. The only way to earn money was to sell herself. But she was not willing to go to a KTV or a place that sold herself directly. She still had a glimmer of hope in this cold world. At this time, one of her classmates recommended her to be a model. Although she had not received any training, with her beautiful face, tall figure, and voluptuous body, she was successfully selected. Then, she took a set of classic-style photos. There was a small response, but the money for the photos was only a few $1,000s. It was more than the money she earned from working, but it was still too early for her to repay the money. Maybe in the end, I can only take that step. I don't know how much I'm worth. Looking at Feng Yunshen's sleeping face, Ai Xiaoxi said with hesitation. Then, she put down her phone and fell asleep. But she didn't notice that not long after she fell asleep, Feng Yunshen, who she thought was asleep, opened her eyes. Looking at the sleeping Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunshen slowly sat up, then put on a coat, and carefully left the room. Feng Yunshen, who left the room, did not go anywhere else. Instead, she went straight to Jiang Hai's room. As she knocked on the door, Jiang Hai also opened the door from the inside. When Jiang Hai saw Feng Yunshen, he was a little surprised. "Why aren't you sleeping?" He glanced at his watch. It was 10 o'clock in the evening. Jiang Hai was still watching TV. It was not time for him to go to bed, but he knew that Feng Yunshen and Ai Xiaoxi were very tired. It was so late yet they were still not sleeping. Why were they looking for him? "What? We haven't seen each other for so long. Don't you miss me?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshen stepped in and rushed in through the door opened by Jiang Hai. Her hands naturally wrapped around Jiang Hai's neck. Ugh hee hee. Looking at Feng Yunshen's charming eyes in front of him, how could Jiang Hai not know her purpose of coming here? But for this kind of thing, he has never taken the initiative. Just like the women's evaluation of him, he is a dull person. "Idiot, put your hand here." Looking at Jiang Hai's somewhat bewildered look, Feng Yunshen glanced at him. Her right hand wrapped around Jiang Hai's neck. Her body was completely attached to Jiang Hai's body, and her other hand took Jiang Hai's hand and put it on her waist. The other hand, "Do whatever you want." After putting it on her waist, she also stuck to Jiang Hai's ear and said softly. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't hold back anymore. Before his other hand patted Feng Yunshen's butt, he deliberately made a gesture to Goldie and Xiaobai. Although they were animals, it was better not to let them see this. Although Goldie and Xiaobai despised Jiang Hai for having the opposite sex, they still obediently squeezed open the door and left. After watching them leave, Jiang Hai didn't care about that anymore. He directly picked up Feng Yunshen and threw her on his big bed amidst her screams. His big mouth also sealed hers immediately. In an instant, the battle between the two began. However, neither Jiang Hai nor Feng Yunshen noticed that after Goldie and the others left, the crack in the door had not yet closed. A ray of light, accompanied by a winding sound, gradually echoed inside the room. Of course, the soundproofing of Jiang Hai's villa was very good. If they didn't come out, they wouldn't be able to hear it. But there was still the premise that if they didn't come out, they probably wouldn't come out. However, at this time, Jiang Hai and Feng Yunshen didn't care so much. Since the last time, Jiang Hai hadn't eaten anything at all except for Xiaoyu and Xiaoyu. Of course, that day in Miami didn't count as eating anything. After all, nothing happened in the end. And since Feng Yunshen returned from Bingsheng, she hadn't done anything. Recently, the imperial court had been very strict. The relationship between a man and a woman was naturally of the utmost importance. Therefore, the person behind her was now accompanying his wife every day, afraid that others would catch him red-handed. Other than still receiving money, nothing else happened. The two of them had been holding back for almost a season. Now that they had bumped into each other, what else was there to say? Chapter 336. Sister Chun. Perhaps because she ate too much at night, her stomach felt a little uncomfortable. Ai Xiaoxi, who slept in the middle of the night, was woken up by the urge to go to the bathroom. She opened her eyes in a daze and found that Feng Yunshen, who was supposed to be sleeping next to her, was not sleeping next to her at this time. This made her a little confused. She called out, but after getting no response, Ai Xiaoxi sat up in a daze and turned on the light. After confirming that Feng Yunshen was not there, she muttered to herself and went to the bathroom first. About 10 minutes later, when she came out, her consciousness was a lot clearer. She scratched her head with some doubts and subconsciously opened the door, wanting to go out and find out where Feng Yunshen went. However, as soon as the door opened, a sound that sounded like crying and laughter drilled into her ears. Although Ai Xiaoxi had not experienced this before, it did not prevent her from knowing what it was. After all, she was a college student, and it was not like she did not see this in the dormitory. Ai Xiaoxi could only say that she was no stranger to this kind of sound. As soon as she heard this sound, she subconsciously wanted to close the door. But before she closed the door, she listened carefully. It seemed that this sound was Feng Yunshen's. Sister Chun is doing that kind of thing? With some doubts and some curiosity, she closed her door and quietly walked towards the source of the sound. Jiang Hai's room was on the other side of the second floor. Because it was the largest room, Jiang Hai occupied one side alone. At this time, not only did a light shoot out from the gap of the door, but the sound also came from there. Ai Xiaoxi was curious and quietly stepped on the floor to walk to the door. Her eyes slowly stuck to the gap of the door. In an instant, the scene in the room was reflected in her eyes. At this time, she only saw Feng Yunshen lying on a man's body weakly. Needless to say, this man was Jiang Hai. The sound that sounded like crying and laughter came unconsciously from Feng Yunshen's throat. And this man, who was also naked, was holding Feng Yunshen's waist at this time. And his body was also erect. Since their vitals were facing the door, Ai Xiaoxi could clearly see that their vitals were connected. Jiang Hai's size was indeed a little too shocking. In the past, she had also watched European and American romance dramas with the girls in her dorm. She felt that Jiang Hai was even more muscular than the black men in those European romance dramas. Looking at the scene in front of her, Xiaoxi subconsciously clamped her legs together. But for some reason, she couldn't take her eyes off him. Subconsciously, he ignored his own position and unconsciously covered his vital parts with his hands. Sometimes, when people were focused on something, they always felt that time passed very quickly. Ai Xiaoxi was like this. She seemed to have forgotten about time and everything else. She just stood there and watched the most primitive battle inside. After about half an hour, Feng Yunshen's voice suddenly became high-pitched for a while, and then completely softened. Jiang Hai also trembled and gradually let go of his hand. However, although he had reached his limit, Jiang Hai didn't seem to be satisfied. His vitals were still placed on Feng Yunshen's vitals. I can't, you bad guy, bad thing, too powerful. Lying on top of Jiang Hai, Feng Yunshen said to Jiang Hai in a tired voice. To be honest, after tasting Jiang Hai, it was difficult for her to have any interest in other men. Then relax, go to sleep. Gently touching Feng Yunshen's hair, Jiang Hai also said slowly. Seeing that the battle inside was over, Ai Xiaoxi looked like she had just been fished out of the water. She supported her already weak body and wanted to go back. Now that her thoughts have returned to her mind, if she was seen by the people inside now, it would be embarrassing. So she was ready to leave. But just when she turned around, she suddenly found that there was someone else beside her. The feeling of a guilty conscience made her scream in an instant, and at the same time, she also saw the appearance of the person who came. The person who came was none other than Jiang Hai's two daughters, Daliana and Marian. When the two girls saw Ai Xiaoxi screaming at this time, they couldn't help but glare at her, and then quickly left. Because their room was not far from Jiang Hai's, and they also left the door open, the two girls quickly went back in. Ai Xiaoxi was still in a state of shock. At this time, Jiang Hai, who also heard the scream in the room, couldn't help but turn over subconsciously and sit up from the bed. He also officially separated from Feng Yunshen. With a soft snort from Feng Yunshen, the two officially separated. But after the separation, the funds that Jiang Hai injected into Feng Yunshen's body just now had some impulse to rush out by gravity. This made Feng Yunshen cover the circulation channel all of a sudden and look at the door with some dissatisfaction. She wanted to see who was so careless. Jiang Hai came to the door in 2 or 3 steps and opened the door all of a sudden. With a bright light in front of her, Ai Xiaoxi, who was still standing at the door at a loss, was also stunned. In her eyes, Jiang Hai's naked appearance completely entered her sight. What's the matter? Seeing her gaze, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. He immediately half-closed the door, revealing only his head and half of his chest muscles. After hesitating for a while, he asked Ai Xiaoxi, "No, nothing, I just want to ask, where is the water?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi was completely dumbfounded. Her mind turned, and she made up a lie that she didn't believe herself. She stared at Jiang Hai and said blankly, "Water. There are fruit juice, orange juice, blue juice in the refrigerator in the kitchen downstairs. There are also beer and red wine. If it's just water, I have installed a water dispenser in each of your rooms. The water in the pipes can be drunk directly." Hearing Ai Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai also knew that she was looking for trouble, but now it was really awkward, so Jiang Hai could only cooperate with her. "Oh, thank you, sorry to trouble you." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi immediately nodded to Jiang Hai and ran away. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but close the door speechlessly. Then he looked at Feng Yunshan, who was smiling behind him. Looking at the smile on her face, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be speechless. What's so funny? We were all visited." Walking to Feng Yunshan's side, Jiang Hai asked her helplessly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan also pulled back from her thoughts. "It doesn't matter if we were visited. I thought of something fun. Forget it. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan shook her head proudly. Facing Jiang Hai's curious gaze, she directly took back her words, stood up shakily, and walked toward the bathroom in Jiang Hai's room. "Let's go together. You can't even walk steadily." Looking at Feng Yunshan's shaky appearance, Jiang Hai also stood up, picked her up at once, and walked toward the bathroom. Who's to blame for not being able to walk steadily, really? Looking at Jiang Hai with a reproachful look, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but whisper. But she didn't refuse Jiang Hai's embrace, and she deliberately leaned in a comfortable position. The two walked into the bathroom and began to wash up. Jiang Hai and Feng Yunshan were talking on this side, but on the other side, Ai Xiaoxi was not very comfortable after returning to her room, because the scene just now was really unbearable for her. As soon as she closed her eyes, she seemed to see the scene just now, which made her more and more uneasy. She didn't know whether it was right or wrong to come here this time. It seems that Sister Chen's sacrifice should be referring to this, but thinking about it, it's really embarrassing. Ai Xiaoxi didn't know when she fell asleep. She only knew that when she woke up the next morning, Feng Yunshan had already returned, and she had restored her original appearance. At this time, she was sitting on the sofa in the room, putting on makeup. "You're up, you really can sleep enough. Go wash up quickly, and then we'll walk around Jiang Hai's manor and see where we can shoot." Looking at Feng Yunshan's normal expression, Ai Xiaoxi even suspected that she was dreaming last night. But after hesitating for a moment, she still didn't say anything, but nodded and walked into the bathroom. After coming out, Ai Xiaoxi quickly put on a light fruit makeup and went downstairs with Feng Yunshan. At this time downstairs, Jiang Hai was sitting there watching TV. It should be a sports channel, because it was broadcasting basketball. At this time, it naturally couldn't be a live broadcast, so it could only be a recording or something like that. "Hey, you're up. There's breakfast in the kitchen. Have a simple meal. It's already past 10 o'clock. I'll take you around, and then we'll come back and make lunch." Hearing the footsteps, Jiang Hai also looked back, and found that it was Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan who came down. Jiang Hai also stood up and said to Ai Xiaoxi, "Sorry to trouble you." As soon as she saw Jiang Hai, Ai Xiaoxi subconsciously recalled the scene last night, which made her a little embarrassed, but fortunately, she could temporarily escape by eating. Otherwise, she didn't know what to do. Breakfast was very simple: a fried egg, a sandwich, and a glass of milk. This was also a more normal thing for urban women to eat in the morning. After going to the kitchen, because she still needed to work, Ai Xiaoxi ate quickly. When she came out again, she was very calm. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. If she was always embarrassed, then he would inevitably be embarrassed. His skin was much thinner than expected in some aspects. After confirming that everyone was ready, Jiang Hai went to drive a four-wheeled off-road motorcycle and prepared to take them around here. Chapter 337. This grassland is my place. We are now in the residential area. The small villas here are where my workers live. After the residential area, there is the grape winery. After the grape winery, there is the forest I mentioned. Although it is not big, there are many wild species in it, such as turkeys and so on. Going east, there is the dock, there is a beach and the sea. Sitting in the car, Jiang Hai explained as he walked forward. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi, who didn't pay attention to it, couldn't help but look at this huge manor curiously. The four-wheeled motorcycle was not slow. When Jiang Hai explained, they were almost out of the residential area. The grape winery in front was clearly visible, but at this moment Feng Yunshan, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, suddenly stopped Jiang Hai. Wait a minute, where is that? As Feng Yunshan pointed, Jiang Hai saw the huge deep pit outside the residential area. Oh, there is a swimming pool. It was left by the original owner of this manor. It is very big, but it is useless. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai also explained. The biggest contribution of this swimming pool is that it was once the temporary residence of Big Fool. Speaking of Big Fool, Jiang Hai seems to have not seen this guy for a long time. Swimming pool? Can we fill it with water? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan said with a surprised look. Yes, because he had seen it before, Jiang Hai is still very sure. Great, in this case we can take 3 sets here. Hearing Jiang Hai say yes, Feng Yunshan also said with a smile. But there is a sea and a beach. I'm not bragging, but the beach and sea here are quite good. There is a sea. Why do you want to take pictures here? Jiang Hai is a little confused. You don't understand. Taking pictures in the swimming pool is different from taking pictures on the beach. Just follow my arrangement. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan patted his shoulder. Jiang Hai really didn't understand this kind of professional thing. If you book it now, you can take 3 sets of the car, 3 sets of the room, and 3 sets of the swimming pool. That's 9 sets. Let's continue. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai shrugged. He really didn't understand. Jiang Hai might be able to understand if they were taking pictures of the swimming pool or the car. But what was there to take pictures of in a room? With one look, it was obvious that Jiang Hai was someone who did not look at or buy photo albums. In fact, the photos taken in the room were the most important. Nowadays, most of the photo shoots in the country were done in a hotel. Because in such an environment, it didn't matter even if it was a little overboard. Driving a small car, Jiang Hai quickly left the residential area and came to the winery. After a few months of growth, under Jiang Hai's aura, his grapevines grew quite well. After Aphrodite and the others came back, they were busy. When they saw Jiang Hai coming with 2 women, these people had some curiosity in their eyes. This is the winery. First, he greeted Aphrodite and the others with his eyes. Then Jiang Hai introduced them to Feng Yunshan and the others. Feng Yunshan and the others also took a look at these charming women, although they were very curious about the relationship between these women and Jiang Hai, just like how they were curious about the relationship between Feng Yunshan and Jiang Hai. But since Jiang Hai did not explain, they did not ask too much, so they put more attention on the winery. Jiang Hai's winery was mainly divided into 2 parts, above ground and underground. The building above ground was like a small European manor, very classical. There was a wine tasting room and the like. Of course, the wine inside now was bought by Jiang Hai for appearance. There was also the underground wine cellar for brewing and storing wine. Unfortunately, it was empty now, but it looked quite gloomy. Here, we can take a set of photos on the ground, but forget about the underground, it's too scary. Looking at the entrance of the wine cellar in front of them, Feng Yunshan gave up the impulse to go inside, and directly said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also shrugged and continued to walk with her. Not far from the winery, they arrived at Jiang Hai's airport. At this time, a helicopter just flew over from a distance. Jiang Hai knew that this was Belle Lester and Marlon Rupert, who had completed their first patrol. These 2 were also the people in charge of the helicopter in Jiang Hai's place. Different from Jiang Hai's calmness, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi beside him were a little dumbfounded. Jiang Hai, what's the situation? Looking at the helicopter in front of them, slowly flying to a building in the distance, Feng Yunshan immediately asked Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also explained to her. That's a helicopter. It's responsible for patrolling in my manor, the patrol of the sea and the patrol of the land twice a day. Looking at the helicopter that slowly landed, Jiang Hai was quite proud. This helicopter is really beautiful. You have a helicopter? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi, who was behind him, was a little confused. Oh yes, there is a helicopter responsible for patrolling, and a normal helicopter is responsible for scattering fish food and so on. Jiang Hai was afraid that they wouldn't understand if he said air tractor. So it's better to say a normal helicopter. God, you actually have a helicopter, that's amazing. Looking at Jiang Hai, this time Jiang Hai became different in Ai Xiaoxi's mind. She found that the more she knew about Jiang Hai, the more difficult it was to see through this guy. No wonder Sister Chen, knowing that it's like a moth to a flame, she still rushed to it. Looking at the calm Jiang Hai, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but whisper, and her eyes unconsciously drifted to Feng Yinshan next to her. Helicopters are actually not a rare thing in the United States, because the area of my manor is indeed a bit large. Patrolling around is a waste of time, and it's easy for others to take advantage of it. It's much more convenient to have a helicopter, and that helicopter is because when scattering fish food, if we use a boat, it takes a long time, and it's also very slow, so it's much faster to use a helicopter. Jiang Hai listened to Ai Xiaoxi's words in front of him, and explained with a smile. At first, he also thought that the helicopter was great, but now this idea has faded. After all, this kind of helicopter is not the kind of private jet. What's there to show off? Can we go and take a look, and take a few pictures of the helicopter? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yinshan hurriedly asked. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai nodded naturally. That's not a problem, no problem. Then he turned the steering wheel, and headed towards the airport. Soon they arrived at the airport, and he let Feng Yinshan and Ai Xiaoxi look around, while he went to find Belle Lester and Marlon Rupert to understand the situation. Indeed, since the helicopter, almost no one dared to come to Jiang Hai's place. If they were discovered, Jiang Hai and the others in the helicopter would shoot at these people, and it would be a massacre. Not everyone can shoot a helicopter into the sky and shoot it down. This kind of scene only exists in China's TV series and Korea's textbooks. In the real world, it's not possible. While Jiang Hai was talking, Feng Yinshan and Ai Xiaoxi had already arrived at the hangar. Looking at the two metal monsters in front of them, they couldn't help but look at each other. This is the small helicopter Jiang Hai mentioned? This is too much of a scam. It's really a private jet, a private jet. Whether it's a helicopter or a plane with fish food, at least in Ai Xiaoxi's eyes, they are all private jets. It seems that this Jiang Hai's wealth is really unfathomable. After looking at the helicopter here, Jiang Hai left with the two. But when they left, they kept looking behind. If you want to sit, when you are done, I will ask them to take you around the sky a few times. It's not a problem. It's your own plane, you can sit anywhere you want. Looking at their longing expression, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two girls' faces were faintly excited. This kind of photo is not easy to take. After leaving the airport, Jiang Hai took them directly to the forest. Sure enough, looking at these towering trees in front of them, and the light and shadow on the path, the two of them liked this place very much. They decided to take a few photos here. After looking at the forest, Jiang Hai took them to the beach. The moment they arrived at the beach, the two of them opened their mouths unconsciously. They only saw the noon sun at this time, shining on the sea level. The whole sea reflected the brightness of the sun, but it was also clear to the bottom. Next to the sea, there is an endless beach. The quality of Jiang Hai's beach is quite good. There are almost no stones, almost 99% of it is fine sand, which makes people feel soft when looking at it. In the middle of the sea and the beach, there is a huge dock. Around the dock, several boats are parked there. Other than the largest fishing boat, Feng Yinshan and Ai Xiaoxi's eyes lit up when they saw the other boats. You have a yacht here? Pointing to the boats, Feng Yinshan shouted excitedly. That's not a yacht, that's a boat. It's used to go fishing in the sea. But I do have a yacht. It will be delivered in about a week. After calculating the time, the person who delivered the yacht said that it would definitely arrive within 10 days. Today is already the 4th day. It should be delivered within a week. God, you really have a yacht. What kind of yacht? Is it big? When she heard Jiang Hai say that it's a boat, Feng Yunshan was a little embarrassed. But after hearing that Jiang Hai really has a yacht, she was about to go crazy and asked quickly, "There are photos here, see for yourself." Looking at her excited look, Jiang Hai also took out his mobile phone and handed over the photos. Chapter 338. The room must be taken, the forest must be taken, the car must be taken, the plane must be taken, the yacht must be taken, the swimming pool must be taken, the beach must be taken, the plane must be taken, the yacht must be taken, the swimming pool must be taken, the beach must be taken, the winery must be taken. Looking at the photos in her mobile phone, Feng Yunshan helplessly patted her forehead. After following Jiang Hai around his manor, the three returned to Jiang Hai's villa. Ever since they could speak, Delina and Marian hardly stayed at home during the day. They would run all over the place, go out to play, go help Aphrodite, go play in the vegetable fields, or take care of Jiang Hai's chickens and wyverns. Naturally, most of the time, they would go pick up eggs and the like. They were playing, but they were also helping Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai knew what they were thinking, so he didn't stop them. They could do whatever they wanted. In any case, it wasn't tiring or dangerous. So at this time, there were only 3 people in the villa, Jiang Hai and Marian. After a rich lunch, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi returned to the room to choose which clothes to go with these places. As for Jiang Hai, he was still downstairs watching TV. To be honest, she was quite satisfied with Jiang Hai's villa. Generally speaking, models like them mainly took photos one by one. If they went to the beach, they would take the beach, and at most they would add the clothes in the hotel. If they took photos of a luxury car, they would take photos of a winery, and they would take photos of a swimming pool. It was not like Jiang Hai's villa, where everything was available. This time, although Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi brought a lot of big boxes, in fact, they only brought a total of 28 sets of clothes, including bikinis and other things. They also gave Delina and Marian 1 set each, so there were 26 sets left, which was 13 sets each. For a photo shoot like this, even if they came together, it was impossible for them to wear the same clothes. Because the two had different styles, they would naturally wear different clothes. These photos were taken in different styles, so naturally, the clothes would be different too. Of course, the clothes had to be very simple, revealing a large amount of flesh. This was inevitable. However, the color of the clothes was mainly white and black. This was more compatible with the cold and aloof style. She was a queen. She was a royal sister. She was a royal sister. She was a royal sister. Ai Xiaoxi, on the other hand, was more of a youthful style. Her main goal was to act cute and adorable. Although her clothes were also very simple, most of them were cyan, sky blue and pink. She even had some plush accessories. If they wore mixed clothes, regardless of whether they were willing or not, at least their aura was not right. If that was the case, then these clothes really weren't enough. The room, the car, the plane, the winery, the pool, the beach, the yacht, the forest, there were 8 places to be photographed. If 2 sets for each place were not enough, it was really a happy problem. Originally, she thought that the clothes she brought were enough, and it was enough for her to look up to Jiang Hai, but she didn't expect that she still underestimated him. Otherwise, we can only take 1 set for some places like the winery. Since we don't take photos on the ground, we can take 1 set on the ground, and also in the forest. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, although Feng Yunshan was the main leader this time, and all the arrangements had to be listened to, Ai Xiaoxi still put forward her own opinion, because she also felt that there were too many things here. 1 set for the winery is enough, but how can 1 set for the room be enough? A bathtub, a bed, and a window, at least 3 sets. Yachts and planes. These are almost impossible to get in the country. I feel that 3 sets in 1 place is too little. There are already 9 sets. The remaining 2 sets in the pool, 2 sets in the forest, and there are still some in the car. No matter how I count it, it's not enough. Scratching her head, Feng Yunshan said helplessly. As she spoke, her eyes suddenly lit up. In fact, it is almost enough. On the bed in the room, We can block the important places and not wear it. This way we can save one set. We can also save one set for the swimming pool, and in the forest, on the plane, and on the yacht. This way we can save 5 sets. It is almost enough. Suddenly, Feng Yunshan's eyes lit up, and she said with excitement, how can this be? Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Ai Xiaoxi knew that she was not joking. She really wanted to do this. Although she had seen people take photos like this before, to be honest, almost no one would take photos like this except for some low-level models who really wanted to become famous. Even if it was a photo shoot, it would require the crew to be female. After all, it was very embarrassing to pose like this in front of some men. Not all women in this industry were very open. Since Ai Xiaoxi came, she naturally knew that Jiang Hai would also participate in the shoot. After all, only the 2 of them came. When one person took photos for another person, even if they did their own makeup, they still needed some lighting, or help to carry something, or give the wind, etc. Jiang Hai participated in the shoot as such person. In the photos, indeed, she did not show anything in the end, but Jiang Hai here saw it clearly. This is work. What's wrong with it? It's settled. Looking at Ai Xiaoxi's blushing face, Feng Yunshan did not care. She clapped her hands and made the decision happily, not giving Ai Xiaoxi a chance to resist. Then she ran out of the room directly, and went downstairs to find Jiang Hai. Because there were many places to shoot, their visa was only signed for 10 days. Now it was the 2nd day, so everything had to be done quickly. Sister Chun, seeing Feng Yunshan leave in a hurry, Ai Xiaoxi's whole body was in a bad mood. It was not easy for her to forget the scene last night, but at this time, she began to recall it in her mind unconsciously. What should I do now? Although she had been mentally prepared, when this moment came, Ai Xiaoxi was still very conflicted. But before she could think of a way, Jiang Hai and Feng Yunshan's footsteps came from the other side. We decided to shoot inside the room first. You are responsible for lighting and doing chores. After walking into the room, Feng Yunshan said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai, who had nothing to do anyway, nodded. It doesn't matter, but you also have to tell me how to do it. This was promised early on, so Jiang Hai didn't care. Okay, just listen to my arrangements in a while. I will go and change clothes first. After talking to Jiang Hai, Feng Yunshan took a set of clothes and went into the bathroom next to her. Only Jiang Hai and Ai Xiaoxi, who was still adjusting the camera, were left in the room. Ugh, I haven't helped with this thing before. If there is anything wrong, remember to tell me. At this time, it was really awkward for the 2 of them to stay here. Especially after the water incident last night. Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. So Jiang Hai smiled at Ai Xiaoxi and said sincerely, trying to break this awkward situation. And I will. Because there were only the 2 of them. Naturally, when one of them was the model, the other person would be photographed. At this time, Feng Yunshan went to change clothes, and the one who took the photo was Ai Xiaoxi. For Jiang Hai's words to break the awkwardness, Ai Xiaoxi was really not in the mood to comment now, because at this time, she was still in a dilemma. If there was really light in a while, what should she do? Okay, the first set. Let's shoot the window in the living room first. At this moment, Feng Yunshan's cheerful voice also sounded. Hearing her voice, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look back. With this look, even Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim. At this time, Feng Yunshan was wearing a set of black lace. Well, a vest and pants, and a black very transparent lace pajamas on the outside. From the outside, it was obvious what was inside, but it still gave off a mysterious feeling. This set of clothes really made her more charming, and Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little impulsive. But fortunately, he was still able to hold on. According to Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai picked up the silver lighting board and stood at the position Ai Xiaoxi asked him to stand. Then Ai Xiaoxi tried a few photos first. The light was okay, but Jiang Hai's position was not very good. Then after a while of adjustments, they officially started shooting. As soon as it was official, Feng Yunshan's originally smiling face instantly turned cold. Although her body was making seductive movements, her face was as cold as ice. That condescending gaze couldn't help but remind Jiang Hai of a cartoon he had been following, a character in One Piece, the Empress. Although Feng Yinchen didn't say that she was so beautiful, the expression on her face was very similar. It was very similar to the feeling of bitch, come and lick this queen's feet. Of course, Jiang Hai wouldn't be cheap, but such a charming expression really made people's hearts itch. After taking a few photos of her posing, she directly took off the upper part of the outer layer of pajamas from the top. The black lace vest inside replaced the outer clothes. In the gaps, there was still a trace of white flesh, which looked even more unbearable. Jiang Hai's face was now about to turn purple, but this was actually nothing. Then, Feng Yinchen began to take off the outer lace pajamas. She took it off halfway and took it off to the bottom of her thighs. The scene of casually revealing the perfect curves behind her made Jiang Hai feel like he was going to suffer internal injuries. Fortunately, after about half an hour, the set of clothes was taken. Just as Jiang Hai was about to let out a sigh of relief, she climbed onto the bed and prepared to start shooting the set of photos that made Ai Xiaoxi think of a way to do it. He only saw her gently pull down the shoulder bags on both sides, but not completely. Her two hands were hugging and stroking there. The original coldness on her face also turned into a little panic. If Jiang Hai wasn't watching by the side, he might have thought that someone pulled down these two straps. Was this really a photo shoot? Wasn't she afraid that the nutrition of teenagers couldn't keep up? Chapter 339. Cough. This kind of action is not very good. Looking at Feng Yinchen continuing to shoot, Jiang Hai couldn't help but whisper, "What's wrong with this? It's not that bad. I still have to shoot the fruit in a while." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yinchen explained to Jiang Hai while doing the action. "Cough, do you have to be like this so hard? Is there no one in the country?" Hearing Feng Yinchen's words, Jiang Hai almost spat out at once. "Is there any law? When is the country so open? As long as it's not exposed, no one will care. Hey, don't ask. This is our job. What you see is employee benefits." Looking at Jiang Hai's somewhat unacceptable look, Feng Yinchen couldn't help laughing. "What employee benefits? I don't care, but you." To be honest, there is no exact relationship between Jiang Hai and Feng Yinchen. If there is, maybe the two are just classmates, further classmates, that's all. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that he and Feng Yinchen had a casual relationship. If she had something to ask of him, then he would naturally help. But if she wanted a position, then Jiang Hai had to consider it. Feng Yinchen also knew this, so she didn't ask Jiang Hai to give her a position. She just wanted to be like this. Jiang Hai is her backer. Everyone saw the brilliance of the fox. Naturally, they didn't see what the fox paid in exchange for this tiger's prestige. For Feng Yinchen, Jiang Hai's jealous expression is also her favorite. "What? Did you fall in love with me?" Feng Yinchen looked at Jiang Hai and said with a smile when she turned around and patted her back. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say. His possessiveness was very strong, but this was not his thing. He didn't know what to say. "Please don't fall in love with me, because you can't give me what I want. I can only give you my body. This is my job and my last dignity, so please don't fall in love with me." Looking at Jiang Hai's hesitant look, Feng Yinchen's eyes softened. After whispering to Jiang Hai, she completely removed her inner thoughts. He put his fingers together and pressed them on his vital parts. Then he turned his body and started shooting. Hearing Feng Yinchen's words, Jiang Hai's impulsive feelings gradually subsided. He knew that Feng Yinchen was right. It was impossible between them. For a moment, the discomfort in his heart gradually subsided. After about half an hour, the photo on the bed had been taken. Next was the bathroom. In the bathroom, Feng Yinchen had already prepared the water. It was not hot water but cold water. Because hot water had steam, it was not good to take pictures. Only cold water was good. But the cold water was really cold. But as Feng Yinchen said, this was her job. Han Guoguo's body was covered with bubbles left by the bath gel. The parts that could not be exposed were covered by the relevant departments. Then they started shooting again. Jiang Hai looked at her shooting. To be honest, from the beginning, the dissatisfaction in his heart had gradually turned into a little heartache. Not everyone was as lucky as Jiang Hai. So he first went to increase the temperature of the air conditioner so that she would not be so cold. Then, he put a bathtub of warm water in the guest room next door. After the shooting here was over, he let her go to another room to take a hot bath. She didn't want to catch a cold. Feng Yinchen and Ai Xiaoxi both knew that the temperature in the bathroom was very low, so they took pictures very quickly. About 20 minutes later, hundreds of photos were taken. They needed to pick out more than 20 photos and add them together with the previous 2 sets of photos to make a total of 76 photos. This was the total number of photos for a set of photos. Phew, I'm so tired. After seeing Ai Xiaoxi make an okay sign, Feng Yinchen, who was originally pretending to be calm and revealing a contemptuous expression, could not help but jump out of the bathtub in an instant. She took Jiang Hai's bath towel and wrapped it around her body. She was so cold that her upper teeth were chattering. Come, I've already put hot water in the room next door. Let's take a bath first. Otherwise, you'll catch a cold. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yinchen could not help but be stunned. She raised her head and looked at Jiang Hai's concerned gaze. She also smiled. Originally, she came here for Jiang Hai's gaze, because only by attracting Jiang Hai's attention, Qili would not deal with her in China. But now, when she saw Jiang Hai's gaze, she felt a little sad. She was sad for Jiang Hai, and also for herself. For Jiang Hai, because she used Jiang Hai, she felt sorry for him, and she was sad for herself. Why didn't she meet this man earlier? She did not know if this man would still be tempted by her if he did not have money, the manner he had now, and such power. But there were no ifs in this world. The current Jiang Hai was the current Jiang Hai. So she was also very sad for herself. Such a good man was clearly by her side, but she could not grab hold of him. Sad. Although the activity in her heart was like a storm, Feng Yinchen was still very indifferent on the surface. She walked into the bathtub that Jiang Hai had already filled with water for her. The temperature inside was just right. After taking a comfortable bath, Jiang Hai had already walked up with a bowl of ginger soup. This was also prepared for her. Of course, if Ai Xiaoxi also wanted to take these photos later, Jiang Hai would also have a share of this ginger soup. But thinking about it, if Ai Xiaoxi really wanted to take these photos, Jiang Hai could not help but scratch his head. He originally thought that the photo shoot would be similar to those fashion models taking a runway show. Even if it was a little sexy, it would be the kind of see-through clothes on the red carpet. But he really did not think that it would really be a red fruit. When Feng Yinchen was taking photos just now, she did not hide from Jiang Hai. So what Jiang Hai saw last night, he looked at it again today. It made him feel very uncomfortable. But now that he suddenly thought about it, if Ai Xiaoxi was also like this, would it not be too good? Okay, it's your turn. While drinking the ginger soup, Feng Yinchen did not forget what she wanted to do. So she said to Ai Xiaoxi, who was still hesitating. Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Ai Xiaoxi was even more confused. Do I really have to take it off later? Hurry up, it's almost dark. Because the shooting started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Feng Yinchen took 1.5 hours to shoot. It was now 2:30 in the afternoon, and 2:30 to 4 o'clock was the prime time for shooting, so Feng Yinchen urged her. Although Ai Xiaoxi was a newcomer, she had taken a debut photo shoot before, but it was the kind that did not reveal her body. She also knew some questions about the shooting, but she still felt embarrassed. Hurry up. Seeing that she was still hesitating, Feng Yinchen picked up her clothes, stuffed them into her arms, and rushed her into the bathroom. Not long after, the bathroom door opened and Ai Xiaoxi walked out again. At this time, she had changed out of her original clothes. Her light yellow hair was specially combed into a small knot on the right side of her head and tied with a green hairband. She was wearing a white shirt, but the shirt was indeed not big. Her waist and navel were exposed. A green ribbon was tied around her chest to make a butterfly knot. Her lower body was wearing a short skirt with gold inside and green outside. It was really short, probably only covering her underwear. On her legs, she wore a pair of black and white knee socks. It was really beautiful. Hey, it's really customized for you. It's really beautiful. Sexy and cute in one. You are really suitable for cosplay. Looking at AI Xiaoxi's appearance, Feng Yunshan on the other side also clapped her hands, indicating that she did a good job. What cosplay? Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but have some doubts. Nan Xiaoniao, don't you watch anime? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but be a little surprised. Isn't Jiang Hai an otaku? How can he not know Nan Xiaoniao? Looking at his confused look, it seems that he really doesn't know. Nan Xiaoniao? Someone in Pirates? Or Hokage? There doesn't seem to be. Dragon Ball and Shinigami? White. Is it Silver Soul? Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai began to try to remember. Hey, you are really an otaku. Do you only watch migrant manga? Love Live 2D Idol Project. Well, you are good. You know that this is an anime character. Looking at Jiang Hai's confused look, Feng Yunshan waved her hand. Although she usually doesn't watch anime, at least she knows who the owner of those costumes is. Okay, let's start shooting. With Feng Yunshan's order, Jiang Hai also began to shine. Because of Feng Yunshan's example, this time Jiang Hai is much better than before. Not long after, the living room and the window have been shot. And the next is the highlight. Go to the bed, unbutton the jacket, and then lie on your stomach. Shoot the front and back. Listening to Feng Yunshan's command, AI Xiaoxi hesitated to lie on the bed. After unbuttoning the jacket, a pure-colored underwear appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Feeling Jiang Hai's gaze, AI Xiaoxi's whole person was not good, and her body began to tremble unconsciously. It was okay when shooting the front, but when shooting the back, she felt Jiang Hai's gaze piercing her most hidden place. AI Xiaoxi's whole person was not good, but in fact she wronged Jiang Hai. Although Jiang Hai is not a gentleman, he still knows that he shouldn't look, so he turned his head away. But AI Xiaoxi doesn't know this. Take off the jacket, and then unbutton the jacket. Hey, you can't tremble. After taking these two pictures, Feng Yunshan issued a new order. But when this came out, AI Xiaoxi's whole person was already trembling. Seeing this, Feng Yunshan was helpless. Chapter 340. Hey, you can't do this. We only took one set today. If you continue like this, let alone 10 days, we won't be able to finish it in 20 days. After dinner, sitting in front of the computer, Feng Yunshan skimmed through the photos taken today. Today's shoot went smoothly for her. There were 3 sets of clothes. Well, 2 of them had no clothes, but no matter what, the shoot was done. However, AI Xiaoxi only had 1 set of clothes to shoot. There were still 2 sets missing, so she could only choose 1 day to shoot, which meant that this afternoon's time would be wasted. She wanted to choose 3 sets of these photos, each with 72 photos, and send them back to the company. The company would mix these photos together and figure out how to make a photo album and release it to the market. Although this money was just a small amount, it was more to make a name for herself. This photo album was actually more of a consumer group in Japan, not in China. There were too many things that were free in China. It was not easy to use a few photos to make money, but this was the most important means of publicity. Like Feng Yunshan and others in this line of work, they were also quite valued. But, hearing Feng Yunshan's words, AI Xiaoxi hesitated for a moment. She also knew that such an opportunity was hard to come by. Jiang Hai's place was simply the best natural shooting location. If she went back to this village, it would not be easy to find this shop in the future. But showing her body in front of a strange man, AI Xiaoxi could not bear thinking about it. Not to mention her boyfriend. Even her father had not seen her body after 10 years old. Now being looked at by Jiang Hai like this, it would be strange if she felt good in her heart. Listening to Feng Yunshan's words, she felt wronged and a little anxious. Looking at AI Xiaoxi's tears in her eyes, Feng Yunshan could not help but have a headache. Okay, what are you crying for? You are still reasonable. Forget it, I will help you think about it. Looking at AI Xiaoxi in front of her, Feng Yunshan said with a look of displeasure, then touched her forehead speechlessly. I understand. No matter what Sister Chen says, I will agree to it. If she didn't take this set of photos, she wouldn't be able to accumulate popularity. If she didn't accumulate popularity, she wouldn't be able to get more opportunities. If she didn't have more opportunities, she wouldn't have money. Therefore, when Ai Xiaoxi heard Feng Yunshan's words, she immediately expressed her stance. Are you really willing to do anything? Looking at Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunshan looked at her seriously and asked seriously. Anything? Ai Xiaoxi nodded immediately. She was willing to do anything. Then it's settled. Go to sleep first. I'll think of a way. Seeing Ai Xiaoxi's serious look, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but smile, then got up and left the room. She walked to the end of the corridor, Jiang Hai's room. At this time, Jiang Hai was in the room, talking to Moses Adams on the phone. Since Jiang Hai and Mayor Kirk finished talking about this matter that night, Jiang Hai had already called Moses Adams when he went to pick up Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi the next day. After yesterday's discussion, more than 90% of the people in the town agreed to promote tourism. More than 90% of the people in the town supported the development of tourism. Not only would it allow people to earn more money, but it would also solve a considerable part of the labor problem. Don't forget that after the development of tourism, the number of sanitation workers would need to increase. It should be known that in Western countries such as the United States, sanitation workers were civil servants who received government subsidies. Even in Canada, sanitation workers earned the highest among all the government workers. Although the United States is not like this, they can still earn $50,000 a year. The most important thing is that there is not much age restriction. For such a thing, naturally, everyone agreed. So on the first day this idea was passed, and today's discussion was mainly about it. Boss, the town meeting is basically over. The people in the town think your proposal is good, but they are not satisfied with the proportion of shares you proposed. Listening to Moses Adams's voice on the phone, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He was very clear about this kind of thing. In fact, whether in China or abroad, people are selfish. Maybe one or two people have noble character and unquestionable integrity, but when it comes to the collective, no one will have such thoughts. Only when a greedy person stands out, then the others will follow. After all, no one will complain about not having enough money. They were happy that Jiang Hai gave all his property to them. This was the reality. I told you that my bottom line is 50%. It has to be at least this amount. I will give you a hint as to how much more it is. The more I have, the more you have. It's that simple. If they are not willing to pay even 50%, then tell them that I will not invest a single penny. Jiang Hai was determined to maintain a good relationship with the town's residents. But maintaining a good relationship does not mean that Jiang Hai will give them money and be their parents. Jiang Hai is right to help the town develop, but the premise is that he also has to make money from it. Boss, I understand. Boss, I understand. I think most of the people in town will understand. These days, the town has already decided on 8 tourism projects. One of them is to visit private manors and horse riding. The Soaring Dragon Manor is not included in this list, so I won't say much about it. Secondly, there is no problem with opening up the beach, fishing boats, shopping streets, beach villas, shooting ranges, and so on. The people here can't wait to make money. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also smiled a little. In fact, he was not worried that these people would not agree, because it was difficult for them to find such high-quality investment. If they really went to find those capitalists to invest, then maybe the proportion of equity would be lower. But don't forget that those people will definitely want the management rights. When the time comes, they will be in charge of how much money they make. They will not be as easy to talk to as Jiang Hai, so he believed that these people would not necessarily agree, as long as they were not stupid. It was that simple. So his words were still very optimistic. They were not talking about buying things, and it was not a one-time deal. Naturally, it had to be done step by step. At the same time, because of Jiang Hai's promise, he also knew that if he could increase Jiang Hai's equity to about 60% this time, he would be able to do it. According to Jiang Hai's character, he would definitely not shortchange his own benefits. This was also the reason why he worked so hard. I am very relieved to leave it to you. Moses Adams was an expert in this field. Jiang Hai was very relieved to leave these things to him. Hey boss, just wait for the good news. Moses. Adams also laughed when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Bang bang bang, at this moment Jiang Hai's door was knocked. Needless to say, Jiang Hai could also guess who came. If it was Delina and Marian, they must have broken in. His room did not have the habit of locking the door. Because in the morning, if little Huang and Xiaobai wanted to go to the toilet, they could not open the door after locking it. So if they were so polite, they must be his guests. It was impossible for Ai Xiaoxi, because she was probably embarrassed to see him at this time. So, it could only be Feng Yunshan. Thinking of this little minx, Jiang Hai felt a fire burning in his lower abdomen. Report to me the progress at any time. Okay, I still have something to do. I will hang up first. After talking to Moses Adams, Jiang Hai hung up the phone, turned over and jumped out of bed. He quickly ran to the door and opened it. Sure enough, when the door was opened, the person standing outside was none other than Feng Yunshan. Who? Looking at Feng Yunshan's lace pajamas and the empty scene inside, Jiang Hai seemed to be unable to control his brain. He took a step forward and hugged Feng Yunshan in his arms. His big mouth was already on Feng Yunshan's mouth, and Feng Yunshan was also very active. The two kissed at the door. Just as Jiang Hai felt that his fire was getting stronger and stronger, and was about to take her into the house, Feng Yunshan pushed him. Don't go to your room. It's full of the smell of dogs. Feng Yunshan patted Jiang Hai's chest and complained. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. In fact, Xiaobai and Little Yellow are very hygienic. Almost every few days, they will go to the reservoir at the cowshed to take a bath. They will wash themselves, so there are no parasites on them. In addition, they usually go to the toilet outside. In Jiang Hai's villa, the smell of dogs is not heavy. But no matter how heavy it is still there. Now that he heard Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. Then let's go to the guest room? Looking at her, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. Come with me. Seeing Jiang Hai's anxious look, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. This Jiang Hai is really cute. Pulling Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai was also a little confused at this time, because he didn't know where she was going to take him. They walked in a straight line on the second floor, and finally came to their room. Go to the opposite room? Seeing the guest room, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say with some hesitation. No, just here. If you dirty the other rooms, you have to clean them up tomorrow. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan shook her head and pulled Jiang Hai into her and Ai Xiaoxi's room. As soon as he walked in, Jiang Hai was shocked. But when he looked back, he found that Ai Xiaoxi was already asleep on the bed at this time. He was relieved, but he quickly whispered, Here? You are crazy, there is still her. Don't worry, she is asleep. Even thunder can't wake her up. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan smiled a little strangely. Chapter 341. What do you mean by falling asleep? Hearing what Feng Yunshan said, Jiang Hai subconsciously wanted to refuse, but Feng Yunshan did not give him a chance to refuse. She directly knelt on the ground and took off Jiang Hai's slightly loose pajama pants. Then Jiang Hai felt an incredible feeling invading his brain. The last time he had this feeling was at home during the New Year. And the partner was also Feng Yunshan. Last night when the two met, it was like thunder and fire. How could they have the leisure and mood to play these things? They were all direct and direct. Today, after Feng Yunshan did this, Jiang Hai really couldn't say anything. Lower your voice. Otherwise, I'll help you too. Jiang Hai is not a person who doesn't care about other people. So he hesitated for a moment and asked Feng Yunshan. He used to watch those Japanese literary action idol dramas, and they all acted like this. They used two numbers that looked very similar to express a kind of attitude. There's no need. When I take photos there, I can't change the color. All three vital parts are like this. The top part is fine, but you can't touch the bottom part with your tongue. Feng Yunshan raised her head and whispered. Then she began to continue. Jiang Hai was enjoying it while looking at Ai Xiaoxi on the bed. He was really afraid that she would suddenly wake up. But Jiang Hai didn't notice that Ai Xiaoxi's eyes were actually open. At this time, she was so embarrassed that her face was red. She didn't expect that Feng Yunshan's method was actually this method. This was too embarrassing. Now, except for pretending to be asleep, she didn't know what to do. Her body didn't even dare to move. It seemed that it had become stiff. Listening to the sound of water in her ears, Ai Xiaoxi was stunned. This Feng Yunshan is too bold. After waiting for the sound of water to end, Feng Yunshan's 2 words made her collapse even more. Come on. Come on what? There's no need to say more now, okay? If you say more, the book will be banned. With a muffled shout, the rhythm in the room changed, and the smell in the room gradually changed. The air conditioner, which was still on, seemed to be getting hotter and hotter. Not long after, Xiaoxi's forehead was covered in sweat. He didn't know how much time had passed. It could have been an hour or 2, but it would have taken at least an hour. As Feng Yunshan's voice sounded for the 3rd time, Jiang Hai's voice also sounded. Just like Feng Yunshan, Ai Xiaoxi's body was sore and weak for the 3rd time. Right now, her body didn't have any strength left. She wanted to sleep, but her mind wasn't sleepy at all. I'm going to take a bath. After a soft sound, Feng Yunshan's deliberately lowered voice entered Ai Xiaoxi's ears. Want to do it together? Let's do it again. Looking at Feng Yunshan's exposed figure in front of him, Jiang Hai also stood up. There was a trace of excitement in his low voice, but Feng Yunshan patted him. No, you still have to shoot tomorrow. If you really don't have enough to eat, isn't there another one on the bed? As Feng Yunshan's voice fell, Ai Xiaoxi was stunned in an instant. Her whole body began to tremble unconsciously. What's going on? Now her mind is blank, and she doesn't know what to do. Don't joke around. But after listening to Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai's slightly unhappy voice sounded. Hearing Jiang Hai's voice, Ai Xiaoxi felt a little wronged. Am I not beautiful? What does Jiang Hai mean by this? Remember, you are willing to do anything. If you don't want to, just say it. I don't think he will force you. But Feng Yunshan didn't give Jiang Hai much time to think. After shouting directly to Ai Xiaoxi, who was still in bed, she went into the bathroom to take a bath, leaving only Jiang Hai and Ai Xiaoxi, who was still pretending to be asleep. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was also a little confused. He decided to go and see what's going on with Ai Xiaoxi first. Walking to the bedside, he saw Ai Xiaoxi's eyes were wide open, which made Jiang Hai feel a little embarrassed. But fortunately, when he walked forward, he had already put on his pajamas, so it won't be like last night. Cough, you haven't slept yet? If you haven't slept, then I'll go first. As it turned out, Jiang Hai really didn't have the guts. His guts were sometimes very big, sometimes very small, especially when it came to women. Wait! Seeing Jiang Hai was about to leave, Ai Xiaoxi suddenly sat up and stopped Jiang Hai. Don't tell me you really want that. Looking at Ai Xiaoxi's somewhat evasive and firm eyes, Jiang Hai's footsteps couldn't help but stop. Isn't this a bit too crazy? I'm willing to do anything. Biting her lower lip, Ai Xiaoxi blurted out such a sentence, then pulled Jiang Hai with her hand. Jiang Hai didn't use much force, and was pulled to the bed by her. The two looked at each other on the bed. Ai Xiaoxi seemed to have made up her mind. She directly hugged Jiang Hai's neck, and took the initiative to kiss him. In an instant, in addition to the man's taste, there was also a faint peach taste in her mouth. She knew that this was Feng Yunshan's taste. She didn't know why, but she didn't feel uncomfortable in her heart. Feeling Ai Xiaoxi's clumsy movements, Jiang Hai no longer hesitated. Just like what he said before, Jiang Hai would gladly accept any girl who came to him, and wasn't afraid of sticking to his hands. Although he had only known this girl for 2 days, since she took the initiative, then Jiang Hai didn't care. His hands also began to take the initiative. After about a few minutes, he also touched the most important part. Feeling the water flow there, and seeing Ai Xiaoxi's red face, Jiang Hai guessed that she should have seen everything. Since the other party was already prepared, Jiang Hai didn't hold back. See, but just as he started, Ai Xiaoxi's whole body tensed up and hugged Jiang Hai tightly. Jiang Hai also felt that something was different. You are. At this time, Jiang Hai's eyes were wide open. He really didn't expect that the girl in front of him had never done such a thing before. Subconsciously, he wanted to end it here. Don't just like this, just wait for a while. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, AI Xiaoxi instantly hugged Jiang Hai tightly and said in his ear. This time, Jiang Hai really didn't dare to move. After about 10 minutes, AI Xiaoxi took the initiative to slowly. Feng Yunshan's bath was very long. After she finished, 40 minutes had already passed. As soon as she came out of the bathroom, she saw that AI Xiaoxi had already taken the initiative. Seeing this scene, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but smile and walk to the bedside. Half lying on the bed, she saw that AI Xiaoxi's face was a little red after seeing her. She smiled and said, I really envy you. The other party is Jiang Hai for the first time. TSK. Sister Chen. Hugging Jiang Hai, AI Xiaoxi didn't know what to say at this time. She could only mutter in a low voice, I'll sleep next to him. I'll sleep at the side. He's yours tonight. Seeing that AI Xiaoxi was still acting coquettishly, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but slap her butt. She got up and went to the next room, leaving only Jiang Hai and AI Xiaoxi. The next morning, when AI Xiaoxi woke up, she found that Jiang Hai was no longer there. She instantly felt a little disappointed in her heart. However, when she saw the dirty and wet bedsheet that was thrown aside at the end of yesterday's session, her face turned red, as if it was congested. She subconsciously wanted to get off the bed, but she suddenly remembered that women would be in a lot of pain the next day. Thinking of this, she tried to move a little. In the end, she found that other than feeling a little strange, she didn't feel any pain. This really surprised her. When she got off the bed, she found that it was already past 9 o'clock in the morning. When she went to wash up, she found that her body seemed to have become a little better. Originally, she was 22 years old, and her body hadn't developed to its peak. After last night, it really seemed to have changed a lot. A certain place that wasn't considered spectacular before was now very spectacular. Sure enough, when she wore the vest from before, it was a little small. Her waist was also a lot thinner, her legs seemed to have become longer, and her skin was more firm. It seems that what they said before about doing that kind of thing can make a woman more beautiful is true. Looking at herself in the mirror, AI Xiaoxi couldn't help but be a little surprised. She had to admit that sometimes, her imagination was still very rich. In fact, the reason why she didn't have any reaction now, and her figure became better was mainly because last night, Jiang Hai injected half of the spiritual energy in the scale into her and Feng Yunshan. Half of the spiritual energy is not enough to repair all the physical conditions, such as the layer that has been broken, but it can restore a person's body to its best state. The hidden diseases will disappear, the skin will become better, the figure will become better, and they will be full of energy. As for the injuries, they will naturally be all healed. AI Xiaoxi found that she couldn't wear her previous clothes, but fortunately, they brought a lot of clothes this time. She picked a different style. Then she put on her coat and walked downstairs. When she went downstairs, she found that Jiang Hai was playing a game with Feng Yunshan. It should be a tennis game. On the huge projection TV in Jiang Hai's living room, the two of them were playing happily. Listening to the laughter of the two, AI Xiaoxi felt a little lost in her heart, but she still walked down. Hey sister, come and help me beat him. At this moment, Feng Yunshan just turned her head and saw AI Xiaoxi walking down, and she couldn't help but say to her. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also turned his head, but there was a trace of embarrassment on his face. No, you guys go ahead, I'm a little tired. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, AI Xiaoxi looked at Jiang Hai, who was still a little embarrassed, couldn't help but lower her head, shook her head, and rejected Feng Yunshan's proposal. Chapter 342. The United States had never been a good place for immigrants, especially to the Chinese. Although many Chinese had been spreading the news about the United States, the people living in the United States knew about it. If you are a rich man, then this is heaven. No matter which city, no matter where, this is heaven. But if you don't have money, America is hell. A hell that will push you to the bottom. Everything in the United States was taxed. The average household savings for most of the 300 million people in the United States was only about $1,000. In China, the average household savings for urban residents was about $100,000. Of course, You might think this is bullshit, but you have to consider how much the house you are living in is worth. Real estate is also counted as assets. So, it is not too much to say that every household has $100,000. Most Americans rent their houses because the taxes to buy a house are too high. Everything in America is taxed. Some people say that America has good medical care, health insurance, and Social Security, but you have to pay a certain level of taxes. For example, the minimum medical care in China is not available here. The amount of taxes you pay depends on the amount of medical care you receive. Without taxes, you can't even buy cold medicine here. Cold medicine is also a prescription. If you go to the hospital for a cold, the local doctor will be merciful if they don't charge you at least $1,000. Most importantly, if you want to bring cold medicine out of China, you are not allowed to do so. If you go to the hospital, you can only take vitamins at home and use the white blood cells in your body to kill the virus. But this is also why Americans look so strong. At least, they don't lack these things. In China, the highest personal income tax rate was 20%, and the lowest was none. People with incomes below 800 renminbi did not have to pay taxes. For those with incomes above 800 renminbi, if they were state-owned enterprises, they would only collect a symbolic amount, a few RMB, or even a few dozen RMB. For incomes above $10,000, other than those web novelists, other people with normal income will not be charged much. Other than that, bonuses and year-end bonuses are not taxed, and they do not exist in America. You had to pay state taxes in America. If your annual income was over $100,000, you would be charged 35% of your salary and bonuses. State taxes would be calculated separately. Remember, this 35%, or even 40%, or even 50% of the tax is something you have to pay. It doesn't include any benefits. You have to pay the residence tax for the house, and you have to pay the tax every year for the 8 years after you buy the car. You also have to pay the tax for medical insurance and Social Security. Naturally, you have to pay the tax as well. For example, if a person lived in New York and earned $100,000 a year, more than 60% of it would have to be paid to the American government, unless he wanted to go to jail. In the United States, tax evasion was the most serious crime, even more serious than murder. There was no such thing as tax exemption in the United States. The most vicious unit in the United States was not the FBI or the CIA, but the IRS. Its full name was the Internal Revenue Service of the United States, which was part of the Treasury Department. There was a piece of news a long time ago. It was said that a dentist from Japan had immigrated to the United States and opened a clinic. He only reported $400,000 a year in taxes, but American dentists had an annual income of $1 million. Evil dentists. This attracted the attention of the IRS, so they started an investigation. They sent people to pretend to be patients, investigate his clinic, and follow his patients like agents. After a month of investigation, they discovered that he could earn $150,000 a month. The difference was huge. After enough evidence was gathered, the IRS came to arrest him. In the end, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison without bail. He also had to pay $5 million in back taxes. Do you think that's the end of it? He still had to pay the rest in one go. The fine was $24 million. If he paid $29 million immediately and went to jail for 3 years, he could still be a dentist when he came out. But if he didn't pay, he would be behind 10,000 years. Even if he died in prison, he wouldn't be able to pay off the $29 million. That was the reality. On the other hand, if you buy something, the money you buy will be taxed, and the money he sells will also be taxed. Two-way taxation was very common in the United States. Why else do you think duty-free shops were so popular? Because of the high taxes, many people in the United States were helpless because they couldn't afford to live. In such an environment where guns were not banned, many people who couldn't afford to live went astray. Of course, most tourists couldn't see these people. Those who did see them were mostly dead. In such an environment, many cities in the United States were called the cities of crime. Some nosy media made a ranking of the top 10 cities of crime in the United States. Cleveland was ranked 10th with 84 murders in 2012 and a poverty rate of 34.3%. Baltimore was ranked 9th with 219 murders in 2012 and a poverty rate of 25.2%. 8th place was New Haven. 7th place was Birmingham. 6th place was Stockton, California. And 5th place was Memphis, Tennessee, which was the city where the grizzly bears were located, with 133 murders in 12 years. 4th place was St. Louis, and 3rd place was Oakland, California, which was the city where the Warriors were located. 2nd place was the newest dark city, Detroit, with 386 murders in 12 years, and a total population of only 700,000. Flint was ranked 1st, with a population of 100,000. 63 murders in 2012, and a poverty rate of 46%. If there were still some losers who insisted that the United States was a good place, they would have nothing to say. But before these cities of crime, the United States was not peaceful, but it was not the center of the chaos. In the decades after the founding of the country, the 4 cities of crime in the United States were all cities in the East. The southernmost city was Miami, which Jiang Hai had been to. The westernmost city was Chicago, which was the city of crime, and the metropolis of New York, which was the scene of The Godfather. Apart from these 3 cities, the city of evil with the longest history was actually Boston. From the 1950s until the 1970s, Boston had been under the rule of the Irish gang. There was no good place in the entire south end of Boston. Of course, in recent years, after the vigorous crackdown by the United States government, the gangs here had long disappeared. But just like in a place where people can't see, there will always be a gray area. There are also a lot of people who are engaged in those unknown professions. Among these people, there are also some who have a grudge against Jiang Hai. For example, this person. Billy Wallen. Do you think we can't find you if you hide? At this time, in an abandoned warehouse in the South District of Boston, several men in black suits blocked a group of people in the warehouse. Of course, rather than saying that they were blocked, it would be more accurate to say that they were found. This was because there were more than 30 people in this warehouse, and there were only 4 of these men in black. More than 30 against 4. It would be more believable to say that they were blocked. Hey, my Huaxia friend, I don't understand. What are you talking about, hide? Who am I? When did I hide? Hearing the words of the leader of the men in black, a hooligan sitting in the middle of the crowd said knowingly, "It's best that you didn't hide. You took our money, but you didn't help us. This matter put a lot of pressure on us. After all, we also have people above us." Hearing this man's words, the man in black didn't care. Then he pushed his sunglasses and said calmly, but the meaning in his words was obvious. The intention of threatening was strong. "Hey, my mysterious Huaxia friend, I didn't mean to not do anything, but you know that guy is not as easy to deal with as you think, so this price can't be the same as before." Squinting, the white man said with a smile on his face, "Billy Wallen, don't play this kind of trick with us. You offered the price of $1 million. Now you have taken $500,000 from us, and you are recruiting and expanding everywhere. Now you tell us that you can't do it. Do you really think we can't do anything to you?" Hearing his words, the man in black gently tapped the leather shoes on his feet. He said slowly, hearing his words, the people on Billy Wallen's side instantly felt a strong murderous intent. The first person pulled out his gun, then more people pulled out their guns, and stared at the 4 people in front of them with cold faces. "Hey man, be careful with your words. I didn't say I wouldn't do it, I did it, but it didn't succeed. The other party is related to the police. If we want to deal with him, we need more people and more weapons. Your original money is not enough." Billy Wallen pressed the gun of the person next to him, smiled softly, and said with a serious face, "Then tell me, how much do you want?" Looking at the man's face, the man in black said indifferently, "The original price of $1 million, double it, $2 million." Billy Wallen stretched out 2 fingers and said with a smile, "I'll give you $5 million. This is a cashier's check for $500,000, plus the previous $500,000. This is the deposit. When you kill him, The remaining 4 million will be transferred to your bank account. Hearing Billy Wallen's words, the man smiled disdainfully, then took out a check from his pocket, gently threw it on the ground, and then left without looking back. As for Billy Wallen's men at this time, they had long been shocked by the number of 5 million. This is a quite large number. They really didn't think that the man's life would be worth so much money. After they left, Billy Wallen's lackey immediately ran over and picked up the check. "Boss, it's true. Are we really going to do it?" Looking at Billy Wallen in front of him, his men said softly, "Hey, the money is in place, so we naturally have to do it." Looking at the bank check for 500,000 in his hand, Billy Wallen's eyes narrowed. At this time outside, the men in black also walked into a car and drove to the city center. "Big brother, why is the young master in such a hurry this time? Didn't he say that things were temporarily put on hold last time?" After getting into the car together, a man in black sitting in the passenger seat took off his glasses and looked back at the man in the driver's seat with some confusion. "I heard that his son was killed in Miami, and all the criminal evidence was given to someone in China by his son's bodyguard. The most important thing is that this Jiang Hai is not only related to Qi Li, but the beef used in the signature dish of the Western restaurant set up by the Qi family was imported from Jiang Hai. If something happens to Jiang Hai now, not only can it break Qi Li's heart, but it can also break the roots of the Qi family and prevent their Western restaurant from becoming a burden on them." Squinting his eyes, the man chuckled and said, but he didn't notice that after hearing his words, a man in the back seat made some small movements. At this time, Jiang Hai naturally didn't know this. Now he was using his shield and leading Feng Yunshen and Ai Xiaoxi to his forest. Chapter 343. Sitting on a rock on a small path in Jiang Hai's forest, Jiang Hai looked at Ai Xiaoxi, who was fiddling with the camera next to him. Today's shoot was in the forest, so there were 2 sets of clothes. After all, it was in the wild, so it was not like yesterday. But the second set was to take off the top of the first set of clothes and cover the important parts of the body. Compared to yesterday, Feng Yunshen's method was very good. At least Ai Xiaoxi was not shy in front of Jiang Hai to the point that she couldn't take the shot. Although she was still a little shy, with her pure appearance, there was a different flavor. At least after Jiang Hai watched the film, he wanted to hold her in his arms and feel sorry for her. The shoot went smoothly. After an hour, Ai Xiaoxi was finished, and the next one to shoot was Feng Yunshen. When Feng Yunshen went to the car to change clothes, only Jiang Hai and Ai Xiaoxi were left here. To be honest, the current situation between Jiang Hai and Ai Xiaoxi was indeed quite strange. There was 30% ambiguity, 50% awkwardness, and 20% unfamiliarity. But Jiang Hai felt that after all, he took advantage of the girl. If he didn't say a word and acted like a heartless man, he wouldn't be able to convince himself. Jiang Hai wasn't a good person, but he wasn't a bad guy either. He wasn't like those pretentious people who always talked about having a bottom line in dreams. For Jiang Hai, he didn't have a bottom line to speak of. Of course, he also didn't have any dreams to speak of. His dream was to have endless money to spend, to do nothing every day, to eat good food, and to have fun. Now that he had achieved his dream, what he was doing now was just following his heart. He felt a little sorry for the girl in front of him, so he was trying to find a way to ease this awkward situation. Do you like photography?" Looking at Ai Xiaoxi, who was fiddling with the camera, Jiang Hai hesitated and asked, "It's okay. Which girl doesn't like to take selfies? It's just that the price of a DSLR camera is very expensive. In China, the cheapest ones are more than 2,000 yuan, and they don't come with a lens. The better ones cost more than 10,000 yuan, like the one in my hand. It costs more than 15,000 yuan." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi nodded, and Jiang Hai also noted it down. In fact, DSLRs were not cheap in the United States. Of course, to Jiang Hai these were nothing. "I don't know much about these. I only know that there are Canon, Nikon, and so on. I don't know the specifics. When I was in China, I only had money to buy the worst camera." When Jiang Hai heard that she was willing to talk to him, He let out a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "This is canon. Although I look down on the Japanese brand is really strong, especially in these electrical appliances." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, AI Xiaoxi didn't think much and continued to speak. She was telling the truth. Indeed, the people of Huaxia were naturally hostile to the Japanese, especially Jiang Hai, who was still in the northeast. His family didn't come from Guangdong, but was born and raised in the northeast. He heard his grandfather say before that in fact, there was no one in the northeast who didn't hate the Japanese. Of course, in addition to the Japanese, they also hated the Russians. In the beginning, the Russians also did a lot of harm to the people of Huaxia. But later, they were the big brother, so the higher-ups asked them to suppress the hatred. In Jiang Hai's generation, the hatred for the Russians gradually disappeared. However, under the propaganda of the imperial court, the hatred for the Japanese has never decreased. Although they hate the Japanese, they have to admit that the development of the Japanese industry is indeed a bit of a bug. The automobile industry, such a small place like Japan, can compete with the United States and Europe, and become the world's third largest automobile industry. It can be said that it is not strong. The light industry, needless to say, the camera, the world's three major camera brands, Canon, Nikon, Olympus, are all Japanese. In addition, the Japanese rice cooker is sold for more than 10,000 yuan in China, and there are people who buy it. The manufacturing of drugs and other light industries can indeed be ranked at the top of the world. Even if Jiang Hai doesn't want to admit it, the rice cooker in his family is also Japanese. After AI Xiaoxi opened her mouth, she started to talk to Jiang Hai about the camera. Her words are not like what she said just now. She just likes to take selfies. It seems that she really likes to take photos. To be precise, she likes the camera. What long focal length, short focal length, continuous shooting, second shooting, and so on. She was talking, and Jiang Hai felt like he was listening to a heavenly book. Heaven and earth can testify that Jiang Hai is really not interested in this kind of thing. In the past, he was a loser. At one time, the most famous saying was, "Photography is poor for 3 generations, DSLRs are ruined for life." In the past, Jiang Hai didn't want to ruin his life, so he didn't play with this kind of thing. Now when he hears these professional terms, it is like listening to a book. No matter what others think, Jiang Hai can't understand. Although Jiang Hai pretended that he is listening very seriously, the tears that are about to come out of his eyes prove that he is not listening. Seeing him like this, AI Xiaoxi can't help but laugh. "You don't have to deliberately talk to me about things that interest me. I said that I was willing to do what I did last night. It's okay." Looking at Jiang Hai, AI Xiaoxi lowered her head again and said lightly, "But," hearing her words, Jiang Hai also knows that it is difficult for him to do anything for this girl. But this matter is a bit difficult to handle. "You don't have to think about it. I have a boyfriend, so you don't have to blame yourself. When I first entered this industry, I already thought about it. My body is definitely not safe. Instead of giving it to a fat nouveau riche, it is better to give it to you. Just like what Sister Chen said last night, it may be a good choice to do it with you for the first time." Glancing at Jiang Hai, AI Xiaoxi's face was a little red, but looking at her seemingly resigned expression, this made Jiang Hai even more embarrassed. But at this time, he really doesn't know what to say. First, it is because he is not good with words. Second, it is because he really can't get over the hurdle in his heart. He can't tell this girl to be his girlfriend, and he can't promise her anything. So Jiang Hai is really in a dilemma now. After hesitating for a while, he still tried to speak. "Then we are, no matter what, considered friends. We don't seem to know each other very well. Why don't we introduce ourselves?" Listening to Jiang Hai's slightly childish idea, AI Xiaoxi wanted to laugh, but she also wanted to cry. This man seems to be really good. Okay. Although her mind was thinking of rejecting such a childish topic, AI Xiaoxi's mouth loyally replied, "Then I will say it first. My name is Jiang Hai. I was born in 1988. I am from Bing City. I have always stayed in the country. I came abroad last year. I once had a failed marriage." Hearing AI Xiaoxi agree, Jiang Hai also began to talk about his own affairs. Of course, it was just a general introduction. He introduced his life, his manner, and let Ai Xiaoxi have a preliminary understanding of him. Of course, he didn't intend to hide his marriage from her. Even if he didn't say, Ai Xiaoxi would know if she asked Feng Yunshan. My name is Ai Xiaoxi. I am from Lu Province. I was born in 1993. I am 22 years old this year. I was originally in my 3rd year of university, but because something happened at home, I dropped out. Now, like Sister Chen, I am signed with XX Management Company. My main occupation is modeling and SG. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi also introduced herself, but also didn't go into too much detail. However, Jiang Hai could hear the sadness in her words. He really wanted to ask her why she dropped out of school. What happened at home? With their relationship, if it was a problem with money, then it was not a problem for Jiang Hai. However, Jiang Hai couldn't say it because it seemed that Ai Xiaoxi also didn't want to say it. Just when the two of them had nothing to talk about, and there was some awkward silence, Feng Yunshan's scream suddenly came from afar. Hearing this scream, Jiang Hai immediately reacted. After throwing the reflector on the ground, he rushed to the front of his car in a few strides. At this time, in his line of sight he saw Feng Yunshan, who had just changed into a leather coat, getting out of the car. Chapter 344. Yes, this mountain lion was the female mountain lion that Jiang Hai caught last time. This fellow sneaked into Jiang Hai's manor and attacked Qi Li, who came out to chat with Jiang Hai. Fortunately, Jiang Hai was here at the time. Otherwise, if it were anyone else, a tragedy might have happened. At that time, Jiang Hai brought the 2 dogs to subdue this fellow, and then sent it to the stray pet center. Why did this fellow come out again? In fact, what Jiang Hai did not know was that after he sent this fellow to the stray pet center, in the beginning, the stray pet center did treat her injuries. However, after her injuries were almost healed, considering that this was a pregnant lioness, it was naturally best to put her back in the mountain forest. Therefore, last week, she was released back to the Alabama mountains. However, who knew that after this lioness circled around, she actually ran to Jiang Hai's manor again. In fact, this mountain lion could not be blamed. Indeed, it was difficult to understand the benefits of Jiang Hai's manor if one had not been to it. Although Jiang Hai had only strengthened the spiritual energy of the pasture, it was mainly for cows to eat. However, in addition to cows, there were many herbivores that would also eat these pasture. Although Jiang Hai had surrounded this place with railings, large animals and humans could not enter. However, it did not prevent some small herbivores from coming to his manor. The environment in the United States was very good, so insects, rabbits, mice, and the like came to settle down. And when they came, the things that ate them also came over. Birds that ate insects, weasels that ate rabbits, foxes, snakes that ate mice, owls, and so on. Originally, there were many birds in Jiang Hai's forest, but Jiang Hai did not care. However, if he counted now, he would find that the birds in his forest were at least 3 times more than at the same time last year. The reason why this mountain lion had attacked Jiang Hai and Qi Li was mainly because it was pregnant and had already treated this manor as its territory. However, Jiang Hai later told it that he was the boss here. But that didn't stop it from coming back after it left. If the grassland didn't work, it would enter the forest. The grass on the pasture had spiritual energy, and the animals that ate the pasture also had spiritual energy. A few days ago, it had been hunting rabbits, mice, and the like. Naturally, it knew how much energy these things contained. Not only could the spiritual qi fill its stomach, but the energy contained in a rabbit was even higher than that of an adult white-tailed deer in the Alabama mountains. Besides, the spiritual qi nourished its body and made it smarter and more agile. It was sure that once its baby was born, its baby would naturally be very powerful. It was precisely because of this that it treated this place as its nursery. Of course, after giving birth, it probably wouldn't leave. There were no other large carnivores here, and it had no natural enemies. It was simply a natural treasure land. It was precisely because of this that it deliberately circled around and swam over from the other side of the coastline. However, who knew that it would encounter another human in its new home after a few days? The fellow who had defeated it. Looking at Jiang Hai, the mountain lion did not dare to move. After experiencing Jiang Hai's combat strength, it had no choice but to be more obedient. It only looked at Jiang Hai from the grass. After realizing that Jiang Hai did not move, it could not help but cower. It knew that it could not defeat this man. Most importantly, this man had 2 big dogs. Thus, it shook its butt and turned to enter the forest. Although Jiang Hai was guarding against it, it was actually more afraid of Jiang Hai. As soon as it left Jiang Hai's sight, it ran away. In a few moments, it disappeared from Jiang Hai's sight. Looking at it leaving, Jiang Hai could not help but frown. This guy is a beast. Although it has no desire to attack him now, who knows what will happen in the future? It seems that I have to search the net. Jiang Hai muttered in his heart as he opened the car door again. Is there anything wrong? Looking at Jiang Hai, who opened the door, Feng Yunshan asked anxiously for the first time. You saw it too. What can happen? It's just a big cat. Let's continue shooting. That guy shouldn't be coming back. Looking at the mountain lion's figure, Jiang Hai said casually. However, after Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi got out of the car, he deliberately went around and took out the desert eagle from the back of the car and pinned it to his waist. After all, no one knows if that guy will come back or not. If it comes back, then Jiang Hai will let it taste the taste of a gun. Although Jiang Hai is unwilling to kill it, if it keeps threatening his manor, then killing it may be the only choice. However, this mountain lion did not know Jiang Hai's thoughts because it left and did not come back. In the following shooting, Feng Yunshan was still a little worried at the beginning. When shooting the pose, she always subconsciously looked behind her. But fortunately later, maybe she really felt that everything was fine, so she relaxed. After a whole afternoon of shooting, they finally finished shooting, packed up their things and changed their clothes. The 3 of them walked back home. But when they went back, Feng Yunshan still had some lingering fears. Hey Robbins. Looking at her, Jiang Hai was also a little worried. Just when he came back, he saw Robbins Garcia, who had already driven the herd back, and was preparing to go home for dinner. He couldn't help but call out to him loudly. Hey boss, what's the matter? At this time, Robbins Garcia, who was riding a horse, heard Jiang Hai's words and couldn't help but stop. He calmed the horses that were frightened by the arrival of the car and asked Jiang Hai. Do you remember the mountain lion we caught? It's back again. I just went to the forest and found it. It seems that we have to find a time to send it away. Looking at Robbins Garcia, Jiang Hai said helplessly. That guy is back again? How did it come back? There are no traces of damage on the recent border fence. Did it swim or fly in? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins was also stunned. The fences on land are taken care of by these cowboys. It is naturally their responsibility to catch the mountain lion, but they really didn't find out how this guy came in. Maybe it came in along the sea. In fact, Jiang Hai wasn't very sure, but he didn't have a seine in his fishing ground, so it was very likely that the mountain lion swam into his manor through the ocean. If this was the case, then the cordon on the ocean would have to be pulled up. But to pull up this cordon, he didn't need to use people, just fish. He had a natural bodyguard in his fish farm. It just so happened that Big Dumb had nothing to do all day, so it was naturally the best choice for him to patrol the fish farm. But thinking about it, it had been a while since he last saw Big Dumb, so he decided to check on him first. Maybe, if it is, then it will be troublesome, because if this is the case, then we will drive it away, but it will come back. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia couldn't help but sigh helplessly, because Jiang Hai's manor, the area of the sea is much larger than the area on land. Except for the manor on land, the coastline extends far, and it is all Jiang Hai's territory. Jiang Hai has no way to enclose the entire sea with fences, unless Jiang Hai uses seine, but the consumption of seine is too high. And the most important thing is that many of Jiang Hai's fish are migratory fish, such as sardines. Jiang Hai will not only rely on his own fish to make money, these migratory fish are also their important source of income. If seine is used, not only his fish can't go out, but other fish can't come in, which is a big problem. Therefore, other than those that were specially bred, there were very few people who would use something like a purse seine. This was also a troublesome matter. It's okay. I will solve the problem in the sea myself. As for the mountain lion, let's see when we can do it. Thinking that he still has big dumb, Jiang Hai can't help but wave his hand at Robbins, indicating that it is not a big deal. The most important thing now is to catch the mountain lion and send it away. This is not because Jiang Hai is stingy, but because the mountain lion hasn't hurt anyone yet, nor has it hurt Jiang Hai's livestock. But what about in the future? In winter, when it snows heavily, most animals will hibernate. What if the mountain lion has nothing to eat? The beast's mind will force it to leave the forest, and then it will either sneak attack Jiang Hai's cows or them. As for cows, a cow was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and people were priceless. Jiang Hai couldn't take such a risk. Okay, let's wait for the first batch of cows. The appointment between Mr. Zhang and Miss Walton is in the next 2 days. When the first batch of beef cows is out, we can send at least 3 people. Boss, you can ask Edward Anderson for a few more people. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia also calculated that there is no problem with the time. The appointed time? Is the appointed time in the next 2 days? Hearing Robbins agree, Jiang Hai also nodded. But then he thought about what Robbins just said. Zhang Dihai and Prawalton will come to get the cows in the next 2 days. Jiang Hai thought carefully. The content of the last call was in the next few days. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai felt a little embarrassed. Unknowingly, his cows are finally going to be released. After a few more words with Robbins, Jiang Hai drove back to his villa. After sending Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi back to the villa and letting them rest, Jiang Hai drove to the dock again. This is because he still has to talk to Edward Anderson about the mountain lion hunt. In addition, he also wants to see Big Dumb. Thinking that he hasn't seen this big shark for almost a month, I wonder how big it is now. Chapter 345. Plop! With a sound, a piece of beef weighing about 4 to 5 caddies was thrown into the sea. As the beef entered the water, all the fish in this area went crazy. No fish was vegetarian. All the fish ate meat, including carp, crucian carp, silver carp, and so on. These fish were all omnivorous. If there were vegetables, they would eat. If there was no feed, they would eat feed. If there was meat, they would eat meat. Even the little phoenix at home would eat meat. Thinking about those fish that had just given birth, it was clear whether they would eat their babies. Surrounding this piece of beef, regardless of whether it was an adult or an underage one, Jiang Hai raised it, or a wild one here. All the fish rushed up crazily and began to bite this piece of beef. The senses of animals were much more sensitive than that of humans. They naturally felt that the spiritual energy contained in this piece of beef was extremely beneficial to them. Not only could it strengthen their bodies, but it could also fill their stomachs. There was nothing better than this. However, just as these small fish were crazily biting there, a huge black shadow suddenly swept up from the bottom of the sea. Some fish that felt something was wrong ran away first, but there were always some fish that were slower to react. These slow fish were destined to become the dinner of other fish, such as Big Dumb. Bang! With a splash, Big Dumb swallowed the whole piece of meat, and the fish around it into his stomach. At the same time, he jumped out of the water. Under the light of the setting sun, Jiang Hai, who was sitting on the boat, couldn't help but smile and squint his eyes. He really grew a lot. Looking at Big Dumb, who fell back into the sea and then slowly swam over, Jiang Hai smiled with relief. In fact, among all of Jiang Hai's pets, although Xiao Bai and Little Yellow were close to him, Big Dumb benefited the most. Jiang Hai fed Big Dumb a total of 4 drops of blood and 3 pieces of spiritual energy. It could be said that Jiang Hai made this shark smarter than a dolphin. In addition, he gave it beef with spiritual energy from time to time, so it really grew very fast. After all, Xiao Bai, Xiao Huang, and the others had to appear in front of others. If they caused any trouble, it would be unnecessary. However, Big Fool was in the sea, If Jiang Hai did not allow him to appear in front of humans, then he would not appear. It was that simple. Originally, when he fished it up, it was already an adult. However, with the breakthrough of spiritual energy, it could continue to grow indefinitely. However, in winter, the growth rate was indeed slower. As spring came and the flowers bloomed, Big Idiot's height really shot up very quickly. For example, after a month of not seeing him, this guy had grown by at least 1 meter. This made Jiang Hai feel very gratified. A tiger shark was generally 3 to 4 meters long and weighed only 159 kilograms. However, Big Dumb was already more than 7 meters long and almost 8 meters long. Even if it encountered a great white shark, it would have the advantage in terms of length. After all, not all great white sharks were more than 8 meters long. Most of them were only about 5 meters long, and the best ones were only 4 meters long, which was much shorter than Big Dumb. At the same time, it did not have some problems such as lack of sensitivity, speed, and physical strength because of its growth. One must know that it grew bigger by eating spiritual energy, and its genetic chain had already broken through. Now, Big Dumb weighed about 6 tons and had a mouth full of big teeth, which made people feel cold just by looking at it. Except for the overlord of the sea, the killer whale, it was really not afraid of anyone. Moreover, even if it faced a killer whale, the outcome was still uncertain. One must know that it was much more agile than a killer whale. At the same time, sharks are fish and do not need to take a breath. When a killer whale goes up to take a breath, it will be the time of its defeat. My goodness, it has grown so big. Patting Big Dumb's head, Jiang Hai was very gratified. He didn't know how big this guy would grow in the end, but Jiang Hai understood that if Big Dumb was exposed now, it would probably be world news. While patting Big Dumb's head, Jiang Hai put the meat into the water and prepared to feed it and talk to it about coastal patrol. However, after Big Dumb ate a few pieces first, he held one of them in his mouth and plunged into the sea. Big Dumb, Big Dumb. Looking at Big Dumb swimming quickly into the deep sea, Jiang Hai was stunned. What's going on? Hearing Jiang Hai's call, Big Dumb just swam around in the water, as if to ask Jiang Hai to wait, and then plunged into the deep sea. Looking at it, this made Jiang Hai's open mouth helplessly closed again. Since it asked him to wait, Jiang Hai was ready to wait and see. Just when Jiang Hai was bored, 2 strong fins in the distance quickly approached from afar. Looking at these 2 fins, Jiang Hai was no stranger to them. The first one was his Big Dumb, but the second one was much smaller than the first one. It was almost the same size as Big Dumb's original fin, which made Jiang Hai a little confused. Just when Jiang Hai was a little confused, Big Dumb swam to the side of Jiang Hai's boat, turned around, and was ready to float up again, but the shark behind it didn't think so. It swam to the side of Jiang Hai's boat and directly hit it. With a muffled sound, Jiang Hai's boat was shaken by the shark. Fortunately, this shark itself wasn't big, and Jiang Hai's boat was also assembled with a lot of money, so it was extremely sturdy. If it was an ordinary wooden boat, the frame may be broken at once. Just when Jiang Hai was surprised, the shark spun around and accelerated again to hit Jiang Hai's boat. But this time, it didn't hit, because before it hit, Big Dumb had already rushed over. Without saying anything, it directly hit the side of the shark, directly knocking it out. Sharks can't speak, otherwise this shark would be depressed to death. Didn't Big Dumb bring it here? Why is he attacking it now? However, because of Big Dumb's attack, this shark became a lot more honest. It swam aside obediently and didn't dare to go forward. At this time, Big Dumb swam to the side of the boat, leaned his body out, and took the initiative to turn his body over, exposing himself in front of Jiang Hai. After a shark turned over, it will lose consciousness and be slaughtered. It did this to apologize after all. In its heart, Jiang Hai is the most important master. However, when the shark saw Big Dumb's action, it swam faster in an instant. Jiang Hai can feel that it was anxious, but it didn't dare to get close. It could only circle outside. Forget it, what's the situation? Seeing its appearance, Jiang Hai was even more confused. He casually said, not caring whether Big Dumb understood or not, Jiang Hai turned it over again. After Big Dumb was turned over, it stared at Jiang Hai with its small eyes without eyelids, then swam to the shark over there, and then swam over with the shark. But this time, the shark didn't dare to act rashly. It just kept swimming beside Jiang Hai's boat. It can be seen that it was still a little afraid of Jiang Hai. Or to be exact, it was afraid of Big Dumb. "This is your girlfriend?" Looking at the shark that kept circling with Big Dumb, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. Then he smiled and asked. He couldn't tell which fish was male and which one was female. However, looking at Big Fool's appearance, it's hard for Jiang Hai not to think in this direction. Although he doesn't know about sharks, Jiang Hai can see that this shark shouldn't be a sand tiger shark. It should be bigger than a sand tiger shark. Isn't it said that all species have reproductive isolation? What's the situation with these two guys? But in any case, it seems that Big Dumb is going to be a father soon. With a curious mentality, Jiang Hai deliberately took a few photos of this shark. He planned to go back and ask Edward Anderson. This old fisherman knows much more than Jiang Hai. He should know this kind of shark. Congratulations, congratulations. You're going to spread your wings in my fish farm. But that's good too. My fish farm will have more security guards in the future. Haha. Here, take this piece of meat. Don't attack me next time. Looking at Big Dumb's seemingly happy face, Jiang Hai also smiled. After injecting a scale's spiritual energy into a piece of beef, he threw it into the water. Although Big Dumb also knew that the spiritual energy was beneficial to it, it didn't snatch it, but let the shark eat it. The shark didn't hesitate and swallowed the beef directly, then it swam faster. Well, it still needs some time to digest. You should get along well with each other. I'm here today to tell you that if you have time in the future, you can help to patrol the fishing ground. If you see any wild animals swimming into my manor from the water, you have to be responsible for intercepting them. If there are any bad guys that you don't know who enter my territory from the sea with weapons, you have to stop them. Patting the head of Big Dumb, who was a little anxious, Jiang Hai poured the rest of the beef into the sea, and then said something to it. After that, Jiang Hai left first, and Big Dumb, his girlfriend, finished the beef. Although the spiritual energy contained in these beef was less than 1/10,000th of the spiritual energy in Jiang Hai's area, it was still spiritual energy. Eating it will only be better for the body, and it won't be bad. Looking at the dorsal fins of the two sharks constantly drawing circles on the water, and finally sinking into the water, Jiang Hai's face also showed a gratified smile. He didn't expect Big Dumb to find a companion, but thinking about himself, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. It seems that I have no right to criticize others. Thinking about Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi who were still in the villa, Jiang Hai lowered his head and pondered for a while. He knew the thoughts of these two women. They were not the kind of people who would accept handouts. And most importantly, Jiang Hai didn't want the relationship between them to be defined as a relationship of money. He couldn't give them a promise, but if he just let them go, Jiang Hai was also a little unwilling. Chapter 346. Hi boss, you're back. Watching the boat return to the dock, Tommy Charles, who was still on the dock and ready to leave, immediately called out to Jiang Hai. Hearing his voice, Jiang Hai smiled and took out a rope from the boat. It was used to fix the boatman, and threw it on the dock. After Tommy Charles took the rope, he quickly tied it to the pier. When he was done, Jiang Hai also walked up from the boat with a big lobster. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't want to catch lobsters, but since he was already here, he didn't care. He found that there were more and more lobsters on the seabed recently, and they were getting bigger and bigger. After all, these lobsters had been eating the water plants that Jiang Hai planted with spiritual energy for several months. In the past, when the weather was cold, they didn't grow too long. Recently, when the weather was warm, they grew rapidly, comparable to dashas. Of course, it was the proportion, not the size. Otherwise, if those lobsters were 1 meter long, Jiang Hai would be confused. But at this time, on Jiang Hai's coral reef, there were lobsters with a body length of more than half a meter everywhere. You could almost see them by turning over a few stones. Even without turning over the stones, You could see that these guys were walking on the seabed, faintly resembling the time when the Americans first came here. In addition to the obvious increase in size, Jiang Hai also found that these guys had begun to give birth. After all, animals such as lobsters, crabs, and shrimps, as long as they grew into babies, there would be a lot of them. Hundreds or thousands of them would be at least, although most of these eggs would not grow into small shrimps. However, after eating Jiang Hai's water plants, the survival rate of these small shrimps greatly increased. In addition, the plankton these guys ate also had spiritual energy, so the survival rate of the small shrimps was quite high. Of course, even if they were alive, they would be eaten by fish. Originally, there were only a few crayfish in a nest, but after being nourished by Jiang Hai's spiritual energy, the number of crayfish increased by dozens of times. Now that Jiang Hai dived into the water, he found that there were small shrimp and crab seedlings everywhere on the seabed, and the fish that originally lived on the coral reef were increasing in number and size. He regretted spending money to buy those seedlings. If he had known, he would have only bought seaweed. Of course, this was just Jiang Hai's idea. No matter what world it was, if you want to survive, you must have a food chain. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's food chain was not destroyed. Today, he casually caught a big guy that was about 70 centimeters long. With Jiang Hai's strength, if he didn't hold on to it, he would feel weak. It seemed that tonight, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi would have a good meal again. However, looking at the crayfish that Jiang Hai caught, Tommy Charles and the others didn't care. Crayfish was actually worthless a few decades ago. When Tommy Charles and the others were young, this thing was worthless. Crayfish was called the poor man's chicken. It was said that when the British came to the United States, they didn't see turkey and crayfish. Most people were starved to death. Later, when they saw the Native Americans eat it, they dared to eat it. However, at that time, crayfish was indeed everywhere, especially in Boston. The price of crayfish was the cheapest among all the meat prices. Even chicken was more expensive than this, even if it was turkey. Therefore, for the people in the United States, this crayfish was actually not very delicious. By the way, help me see what kind of shark this is. After Jiang Hai went ashore, he stuffed the crayfish into a bag filled with water that he had prepared beforehand. Crayfish could live well out of water, but big lobsters would die soon after leaving water. In order to eat fresh, Jiang Hai would deliberately put it in a bag every time, so that it could stay fresh for a longer time. After putting the crayfish in, Jiang Hai also handed the phone to Tommy Charles and asked him, "Oh, this is a rat shark, a very annoying shark. Some of them are crazy, and they often inexplicably attack people in fishing boats. Some small fishing boats will hate them, but for larger boats, these guys can't do anything. For example, it can't hit our boat. But even if it is attacked, it almost won't kill people." Glancing at Jiang Hai's phone, Tommy Charles saw what the shark in it was at a glance. For them, it was very easy to distinguish sharks. Although in Jiang Hai's eyes, these sharks almost all look the same. "Oh, then we have to be careful when we go fishing. This shark is also my pet, and she is Big Fool's girlfriend." When Big Fool was still young, Tommy Charles had seen Big Fool before, so he also knew about Big Fool. Now that they heard Jiang Hai's words, they were also stunned. To be honest, they really envied Jiang Hai's ability. He really raised everything. "By the way, boss, I heard that our town is going to be developed into a tourist attraction." After instructing Tommy Charles, Jiang Hai was ready to leave. But before he left, Tommy Charles stopped him. "Yeah, there is such a thing." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also nodded and looked at him with some doubts. In fact, Jiang Hai's first impression of this Tommy Charles was not very good. Maybe it's because fishermen really don't have to worry about not finding a job. So when he first met him, he was waiting for a good offer. Although after he came here later, he was very good at work. But after all, he had a criminal record. So when Jiang Hai heard his words, he thought he was going to resign. No, boss, I am very satisfied with my current job. Really, I swear to God. I asked about this mainly because my wife and the others are in the manor now. In terms of the vegetable field, Philip's wife is mainly in charge. Except for sowing time, they don't need to do anything else. The day before yesterday, they went to town and heard about this, So they inquired about it and learned that you are the main investor. So they asked me to ask if there is any suitable job for them. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai's gaze, Tommy Charles also knew that Jiang Hai had misunderstood and immediately expressed his loyalty. Although the fisherman's income was not small, who would complain about earning more? Tommy Charles and the others all had families. Now that their children were not around, and their wives had nothing to do except for doing some housework, it was indeed a good thing to have a job. Oh, it doesn't matter because I will be responsible for funding to build some villas by the sea for tourists to live in. At that time, there will definitely be a shortage of cleaning staff or management staff in the villas. Although I have handed over the management rights to the town, it is not a problem to put a few people in. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai nodded subconsciously. Indeed, this was not a big problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tommy Charles couldn't help but shout happily. This is indeed a good thing. Even if the income is low, it can be considered as subsidizing the family. Hearing his gratitude, Jiang Hai also smiled, put the lobster in the back of the car, sat in the driver's seat, and headed to his villa. But when he was walking, a thought suddenly flashed in Jiang Hai's mind. Originally, there were some problems with Feng Yunchen and AI Xiaoxi. If they don't do this job, when the tourism industry here starts, they can come to help, right? At most, he will pay for their expenses at that time. Jiang Hai, who still had some hesitation, suddenly found a direction. Although his feelings for Feng Yunchen and AI Xiaoxi may not be as good as Aphrodite, not to mention the only one who is treated differently by Jiang Hai Shinty Clive. But if he can keep them by his side, it is not a bad thing. At least they will not suffer. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai stepped on the gas pedal faster and faster. Originally, the road was not far, so Jiang Hai quickly rushed back home. When he returned home, he found that Feng Yunchen and AI Xiaoxi were sitting at the table playing games with Delina and Marian. The game they are playing now is called German Heart Disease, which is a fast reaction game. Jiang Hai also played with them before, but it's just a simple game, because this game mainly depends on who has faster reaction and mental arithmetic ability. Although Delina and Marian are good, how can they be Jiang Hai's opponent? However, these four people are now playing quite happily. If it was before yesterday, Feng Yunchen and AI Xiaoxi would not be their opponent. But now, after the two of them split some of Jiang Hai's spiritual energy, although their reaction speed is still not as fast as theirs. But with the advantage of being adults, they occasionally win. They were having a lot of fun. Looking at them, Jiang Hai smiled and walked over. He was going to tell them about it. But this matter is better to hide from Delina and Marian. After all, the relationship between the three of them is a bit awkward. It's better not to let the children know. So after Jiang Hai entered the house, he directly said to the four of them, "Okay, stop playing, Delina, Marian. You go and call little Huang and the others back. Then go and get me some beef. I am going to cook. You two come and help me." Jiang Hai first arranged tasks for Delina and Marian. The two girls are not unfamiliar with this kind of work, so they quickly nodded, packed up their things and ran away. As for AI Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen, although they are curious about why Jiang Hai is looking for them, they still followed in. Let me say this first, I don't know how to cook. I can at most help you. As soon as they entered the kitchen, Feng Yunchen raised both of her hands. I don't know how to cook either. AI Xiaoxi on the other side is the same. There are not many girls in their generation who can cook. I don't need you to cook. I mainly want to tell you something. Our town is going to be developed into a tourist attraction. I have invested in it. So I want to ask if you want to change your job. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.